Hello, Publius.
Hey Dumpling, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. All right. Ready to take it away?
Okay, so a lot to talk about. Uh, we have sort of a prepared statement we're gonna read, and then want to open it up to questions and comments. So, uh, it's a very humbling set of circumstances that have gotten us to this point in time. Uh, we've lost the voice modifiers, obviously. We think it's in the best interest of Beanstalk moving forward for us to disclose who we are. We hope that doesn't become the focus here, but in the spirit of honesty and transparency, we don't want we don't want there to be any sort of ambiguity about whether we were involved in any way in attacking the protocol, which we were not. So we're gonna disclose who we are and then kind of talk about what happened and then open up the floor and try to talk about next steps. So, my name's Benjamin Weintraub. I'm one of three people that you guys know us as Publius. My two other friends, Brendan Sanderson and Michael Montoya, we are who you have previously known as Publius. We are the individuals who created Beanstalk, and we're sorry to introduce ourselves to you guys in these circumstances. Despite our commitment to decentralization and really trying to have Beanstalk not have a head in any capacity and really just run by itself, we've decided to disclose our identities because of what's happened over the past day. So, it is what it is. It's important that we say explicitly, we had nothing to do with the recent attack on Beanstalk whatsoever. We had no involvement with, we had no prior knowledge of anything having to do with the attack whatsoever. We don't know who did it at the moment. Like all other investors in Beanstalk, we lost a significant amount of money this morning when the hack occurred, and it's very much too bad that this has happened. So as soon as we learned of the attack, we immediately reached out to the FBI. They have not reached back out to us, but we informed the FBI's Internet Crime Center about what happened, and we intend to fully cooperate with the FBI to try to track down the perpetrators, and if it's at all possible, to try to recover any of the funds that were stolen in this attack. So, at this point, just to state it, here's at a high level, and we did type this out in a message, but just to state it for everyone listening, here's our understanding of what happened with the attack. So, an unknown Ethereum address deposited approximately 212,000 beans into the silo a couple days ago. And this is the attacker's address. And that the deposit allowed them to acquire enough stock to propose a BIP, because you need at least 0.1% of all stock to propose BIPs. And they proposed BIPs 18 and 19 on chain yesterday, and there was a lot of uncertainty as to what BIPs 18 and 19 were. It was the first time that there had been ever a BIP that was proposed that Beanstalk Farms was unaware of at the time it was proposed. So it was definitely like a weird circumstance. And, in short, it seemed that the BIP or BIPs were both to donate 250,000 beans to the Ukraine. And we thought it was very strange, but, we didn't we obviously were not aware of what was going on or what attack was in progress. So 24 or a little over 24 hours after the BIPs were proposed, because that's the minimum time for a supermajority vote to pass. The attacker took out a flash loan of $1 billion and acquired as many whitelisted assets for the silo as possible, deposited them all in the same transaction, and then in doing so acquired enough stock to commit the BIP that they had written to basically perform arbitrary actions on Beanstalk, and that facilitated them to withdraw all of the assets from the protocol. And they were able to then liquidate all of those assets and drain all of the liquidity from the pools. And in short, all of the value, the non-Beanstalk value in the protocol, which was, around $80 million or so, all of that was stolen this morning. So that's obviously terrible, and we're going to do everything we can to try to figure out who did this and bring them to justice. But yeah, obviously there's a history of how these attacks have gone in the past, and it's an ugly situation. So what else? Basically, here's what's happened since the attack. So Publius, we used our ownership privileges of the smart contract to do two things. We paused Beanstalk, and we immediately removed governance. So at the moment, the protocol cannot be attacked, but it remains to be seen what the path forward is, because there's no funds in the liquidity pools. And the system is paused, but it could be unpaused. But fundamentally, there's an economics problem of there's no money in the liquidity pools. And given that Beanstalk is not collateralized, the value of the beans are really dependent on there being sufficient liquidity in the pools. And that's where this ultimately creates an economics problem that we face at the moment. So we're all continuing to evaluate what the next steps are moving forward. And we're trying to figure out if it's possible, and if it is possible, how to do it to resuscitate Beanstalk and get it back up and running. And if it's at all possible, we're determined to make it happen if it is. So we're evaluating what we can do. It is not, it doesn't change what happened, but it is just, we do want to say that Brendan, Michael, and we are all really, distraught might be an understatement. We're heartbroken about what's happened. The community that has formed around Beanstalk is incredible and means really the world to us. And to say the community has been the primary place we've been deriving our meaning from for the past 9 months or so since launch might be an understatement. So we love all of you and are just torn up that this has happened. The 9 months prior to launch were like, we put our blood, sweat, and tears into the protocol, and since it launched, we've tried our best to support the community and get Beanstalk Farms and Beansprout off the ground to facilitate a really decentralized development process for Beanstalk, and it was working. And that's the pill that's particularly difficult to swallow, is things were working. And we really do believe in the value of a decentralized credit-based stablecoin, and despite what's happened today, we think that that's still what the key to unlocking the potential for DeFi is. And one of the reasons we also want to just disclose who we are is so that there's not this, this overhang of over credit-based stablecoins in any way. Like we believe in the vision, and we want it to succeed as much as possible. And we really don't feel like this is about us. So we just want to do what we can to put Beanstalk in the best position to succeed if it's possible going forward. So, what else? Beanstalk, and I think all of you know this, but Beanstalk was designed and implemented as an open source and decentralized system that could be improved over time via on-chain governance. And it's unfortunate that the same governance procedure that facilitated the adoption and implementation of like a dozen or more than a dozen BIPs that really put Beanstalk in a position to succeed was the thing that was ultimately its undoing. So, yeah, the whole thing is a very humbling experience, and we understand everyone will have lots of questions, and we will do what we can to answer those questions as honestly as we can, and also acknowledge this is a really tough time for people that lost money, and that's really hard. And we just want to say thank you to everyone that reached out to us to encourage us, and your guys' words have really meant the world to us on a very difficult day. So we remain committed to you guys and hope that as much as possible this fuck up does not ruin what's been created, and recognize that at the moment it appears that might be the case. So with that, want to open it up to questions and comments, and understand that this sucks. So with that being said, thank you all for listening to us.
Publius, I'll just kick it off with, I know there's been a lot of conversations today about possible next steps and plans for moving forward. No, also in the past, you've mentioned how bootstrapping Beanstalk from the ground was harder because of your anonymous status. Can you speak a little bit to, how you, now that you have, come out with your, with who you are, is there any way you can leverage current, connections or anything like that? And also just opening it up a little bit for, where you anticipate, what some next steps options, really high level, might look like.
So to answer your second question first, Dumpling, the starting place is, what is the current state of Beanstalk? So the contract is paused and is in somewhat of an unusable state, in the sense that there's no governance facet, and a huge amount of the beans are still owned by the exploiter or attacker. And so there's going to need to be a significant amount of development done to migrate over to a new contract at the minimum, and to get this launched back up in, let's call it a similar state to what it was in before, independent of the absence of liquidity. So let's just assume theoretically that the distribution of pods and stock and potentially deposited beans can be fixed. It's unclear at the moment exactly what can be done, but assume that that's the case. The main problem still remains, and this is the substantive point, that there's still an absence of liquidity, which again is where beans derive the majority of their value. And so the point is, we as a community need to figure out how we're going to source liquidity and reseed the pools in a way that doesn't facilitate like an immediate run on that liquidity. And there's obviously going to be some people that have lost faith and want to sell. And there's, Beanstalk is an open system that anyone can do that. But the point is, and this is one of the reasons we also want to come forward, as much as we can minimize the loss of faith in the system, assuming that there is some sort of plug in the liquidity, we really do want to try to, face this head on and minimize the amount of FUD that's out there. So let's say that the fundamental problem is seeding liquidity. Now, again, the other problem is trust. But if we can fix the trust problem, which is what we're trying to do in part by talking now, obviously doesn't fix all of it, but let's assume that we can get some people are not all going to lose faith in the system, and based on the response from a lot of the people that we've been speaking to today, people seem very encouraged to continue. So then the fundamental question becomes, how do we source liquidity? And on the one hand, there's something to be said for, as a protocol, Beanstalk could just kind of function as normally and do it really slow and steady, do a slow burn. Would probably make the argument that at the current weather, that might not be the most sustainable solution because the expectation is that the price would be trading below $1 for a while. And, at the current weather, it's unclear how long that could be sustained. And so instead, the question is, how can we all at once kind of reseed things and get things going off all at once? There would likely have to be some sort of auction or some sort of OTC sale or deal that the DAO cuts to a group of people that are willing to seed some of this liquidity. There's a lot of different options to be considered, both from an economics and a capital perspective, but they need to be more thoroughly fleshed out, both from how the system will work to make sure that everything is distributed in a way that is sustainable, and again, will still be sufficient to attract the liquidity that the system needs to restart, basically. So we have, and to now answer your first question, Dumpling, and this is only semi-related to disclosing our identities, whereas before when we launched Beanstalk, we were really committed to building the whole network from the ground up and launching it clean, and trying not to leverage our personal network as much as possible. Based on the turn of events over the previous 24 hours, or I guess today, that no longer seems like prudent behavior. And so, in short, there's no promises whatsoever, but we're trying our best to see if there's any way whatsoever to source this liquidity. And there's some other community members that are also doing their part to do that, and they may want to comment on that as well. But the point is, this did just happen today, and this isn't something that's going to get restarted in 24 hours. It's going to take a couple weeks at a minimum, maybe a month or two to get this done properly, and that's okay. There is still the Trail of Bits audit scheduled for just about 2 months from now, and so maybe there's something to be said for restarting after having Trail of Bits audit the code. We're not inclined to rush it, given that currently there's nothing to rush, if that makes sense. So we're committed to trying to get this right, but want to take the time to work with the community to make sure that we're pursuing the optimal solution for Beanstalk.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm bringing up. I did a question order in the chat. I'm bringing up Helen now to ask her question. Helen, go ahead. Helen, we can't hear you yet. Let you know when we can.
I forgot about the push to talk. It's Helon.
Okay, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Can you hear now? Can you hear?
Yes, can hear now.
I had a two-part question. One was, how much responsibility does Omniscia, or however you say it, have? And then the other was, what happened to the retainer that they had to audit future BIPs?
Yeah, so in terms of responsibility, we're not in the business of pointing fingers. We did take a look at the report that they published and didn't feel that it was a genuine accounting of what occurred. The emergency commit function that was exploited has been there from launch, and has been in the white paper since launch, and there was nothing that changed in any of the code that has been unaudited to affect that. But they're going to say whatever they want to say, and that's okay. With regards to the retainer, the short answer is the hope was that they were going to continuously audit Beanstalk and get them up to the current version of Beanstalk as soon as possible. In reality, what happened was Omniscia took a very long time. We originally were supposed to have the initial report in like December, and we didn't get it for a long time. And the short answer is we didn't feel like it made sense to just stop developing Beanstalk for the audit, which was just taking forever. And so, Beanstalk Farms continued to develop Beanstalk, in short. And when the Omniscia audit went live, Beanstalk Farms was as transparent as possible that Beanstalk was audited through BIP7, which was the vast majority of the code, and again, included the part of the code that was ultimately exploited. So there have been some changes to the code since BIP7 went live that are not audited. And the hope was to get those audited as soon as possible. We've been harassing Omniscia to try to get that done ASAP. But the short answer is there's a large shortage of auditors in the space, and it's very hard to get them to do things in a timely fashion. And given the state of Beanstalk and the way that it is being developed, we didn't really feel like it made sense to stop developing it altogether. And we tried to be as transparent as possible about that.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, gonna bring up Smokey. Okay, go ahead, Smokey.
Hey, fellas.
Let you know that I can hear you. Okay, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, alrighty. Hey guys, so two questions. One on its head. Has there been any outreach or any conversation with folks who would be able to fill this liquidity gap at the moment, whether that's VCs, market makers, or high net worth individuals / anything in between? And two, can you conceive, or how do you guys feel about a design similar to that which was discussed by some members and myself a little bit earlier today, which involves basically giving people a haircut rage quit option along with a progressive unlocking option, followed by a period during which you try to get the bean printer back on, and the people who provided that liquidity to basically get back to peg, or let's say 50 cents or 75% cents even before the market comes in, are basically made whole by being interspersed along the pod line and diluting existing pod line holders. My thought process here is that there's a few things to balance. One is, of course, narrative and mind share, given how quick the DeFi space moves, and how 2 months is kind of an eon, even in waiting for an audit. Two, in maintaining community trust and avoiding another sort of like bean winter. And three, in ensuring that the pod line doesn't spiral out of control such that it's above $1 billion or something, and then people are worried about the protocol never paying out. So would appreciate any thoughts there, primarily with how is VC or funder or liquidity provider interest looked here, and do we know what incentive structures they might be into?
So to answer your former question, we're calling the whole Rolodex, if you know what I mean. And that's not to say that we're the most connected people in the world. But we're everyone that we know that was part of Beanstalk and was looking to support it and is continuing to look to support it, and people that were not previously supporting Beanstalk but might be interested in sort of a one-off opportunity here. We're pursuing all options and would encourage people that also have their own network that might be interested in this to present them. Basically, we're going to pursue all options on that front. With regards to what that might actually look like, there's a lot of different ways to structure it. And in short, Beanstalk has the ability to issue pods, and there's also, in theory, via BIP, the ability to issue stock for a discount or for providing that sort of initial liquidity in a one-off fashion. And with regards to the idea of having a rage quit option and then some sort of tiered system, over time, there's nothing in practice wrong with that. But in reality, that would be a secondary question after, where you're sourcing this liquidity from. So, and would likely be guided by the capital that is interested in coming in on that front, if that makes sense. So, a lot of different options to potentially pursue here. But I think there's the beauty of having both an equity side of things and a debt side of things is there's a lot of flexibility as to how Beanstalk could structure this. But these are unique circumstances, so it's unclear how the structure might work in practice depending on who the capital is.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think one thing I'll just push back on a little bit is that I think a lot of people at the moment are still sort of unfamiliar or foreign to the to the equity vehicle almost here in terms of like the value of stock slash seed and how that plays into the wider ecosystem. And I imagine that most VCs evaluating on past performance will probably be looking at, okay, how do I ensure that I get bean over bean returns in terms of either, from some silo tax or the pod line or whatever. And at the moment, apart from trying to fuel hopium, I find it hard to imagine a scenario where the community, like where there's enough capital coming from the community itself to close that gap without being turning into a shitcoin along the way, right? Like, I guess that what I would ask you guys is, do you think it's feasible to act on this in a short time frame, such that the momentum that was building up to generalized minting, etc., is actually maintained to some extent with the right capital infusion, while also noting that a solution that works here will probably end up in one where the VCs win the most, or capital providers, whatever you want to call them, win the most, but the community doesn't go to zero.
So the short answer is it's unclear what the best way to structure it is, but think that particularly if you look at the structure of pods, for example, it's very clear that if you define at a supply when the pods will mint, there's like a way to price in how much of the system Beanstalk anyone is buying. And so don't necessarily feel like from a long-term perspective the integrity of the economic model needs to be compromised in this juncture, if that makes sense, as opposed to a one-off sale of a whole bunch of pods, for example, that until all of this set of pods are redeemed, will receive 1/3 of all mints going forward. So the old pod line will receive 1/3, stockholders will receive 1/3, and the new pod holders will receive 1/3, for example. And then it's like there could be an auction mechanism to figure out how to fairly distribute the pods in the new line in an economically efficient fashion. But that's not going to happen immediately. So to answer your question around momentum, there's momentum from an economics perspective because the model was starting to work, and the hope is to parlay that forward. But there's no momentum on like an hour-to-hour basis. This is, in order to get this right, it's going to take at least a couple days to find the capital and to figure out how to structure this. Then it's going to take at least another couple days to facilitate a governance vote on this from stockholders. And yeah, it's very unclear. How basically this will all come together. But I think that there's a very strong argument to be made that for the right investor, this is a unique alpha opportunity. So don't think that all hope is lost. If you kind of run a little bit of napkin math, prior to being exploited, the total bean supply was something like 108 million beans. And so in practice, let's say that the amount of liquidity that needs to be raised to be trading against all of those beans at $1, and that's close to the upper limit, let's call it, you'd need $108 million. And in reality, particularly if you assume there's some retention of faith in the system and not everyone is running for the exits, you don't necessarily need all of 108 million per se. So the number might be something, and we're making this up, but it might be something closer to like $50 million, where if there was a way to gradually deploy the $50 million into liquidity after Beanstalk had its state restored to some extent, where there was an opportunity for people to sell their beans at a discount, let's call it, to start, you wouldn't want to immediately return the price to the peg per se, because there are certainly some people that would be inclined to sell their beans below $1, and one of the core tenets of how Beanstalk works is Beanstalk is happy for them to sell below $1 if they want to. So the question is, how do you deploy liquidity in a way that is economically efficient? And that's another thing that's a little bit unclear at the moment. And how do you do that in a decentralized capacity? Maybe you don't, and maybe just whoever the capital is announces that they're going to deploy the capital and over what time period they're going to do it, and then they just do it. And then it could be some sort of unique fundraiser or contract where there was this unique set of pods, and once the fundraiser was completed, the Beanstalk could restart or something like that. There's a way to build this out where there's a path forward, but at the end of the day, it's a little bit unclear what that path forward looks like. It is clear that the fundamental limitation is a capital problem at the moment, and one of the live by decentralization, die by decentralization. One of the things is that Beanstalk has not been backed by venture capitalists from the beginning, and while there certainly seem to have been a lot of larger inflows of capital recently, such that hopefully there is some larger interest in Beanstalk at the moment, there is no angel coming from the sky with $50 million that's just like, oh, we love Beanstalk and we're gonna save this thing, a la what, for example, happened with Wormhole. So we do need to think about, from an economics perspective, how can the system incentivize or attract a minimum of around $50 million of liquidity, and to have it deployed in a way that is efficient to effectively, to facilitate the restarting of the system to some extent.
Yeah, I think we're like very broadly on the same page on many of these points. The only reason I mentioned a rage quit option is with the same eye towards, being willing to have people sell below peg. I saw it as a means of accelerating that, and then perhaps reducing the amount of capital that actually needs to be raised. Because I think that it's a lot easier to raise 10 to 20 mil, or 10, let's say, if let's say 60% or whatever of people rage quit, right, and then get halfway to peg or something, than it is to raise. Like they're two different. They're not actually different magnitudes, but on a fundraising scale, they kind of are, right?
Well, it's funny. It's like Beanstalk kind of went through this already when it was at 24 cents, and it's like, how do you rebuild from this? And while the order of magnitude has changed to a large extent because there's 700 million pods outstanding, and there's 100 million or so beans that were outstanding prior to the attack. At the same time, there's nothing from an economics perspective that says if Beanstalk can't now continue to attract creditors, it won't be able to return the price to the peg. And so now it's really, and there is something to be said for, and the purist in us kind of likes the idea of just letting the system start to run again, kind of as is, and letting it rebuild from a cent, and letting the core credit mechanism work its magic. But think that it would be great to have some sort of jump start or explicit inflow of capital from somewhere that reinstilled confidence in the system, such that the negative feedback loop was limited as much as possible. But at this point, there is going to be a large amount of art as opposed to science associated with getting this thing back up and running in a smooth fashion. So, and again, the first question is a lack of capital.
Yeah, I thanks for answering my questions, man. I guess my last point would only just be, I think that the time scale that this is done within, in terms of like community trust / broader crypto narratives, probably matters more than a purist might want it to put bluntly.
Oh, agree with that. We're inclined to get this up as soon as possible. So the purist in us has nothing to do with this is a practical matter.
Oki, thanks for all your time today and in brainstorming, and thanks for your good questions also.
For sure, man.
If you want to come up later and ask another one, just raise your hand. I'm gonna invite Bean on the stage, who's next in line. Bean.
Hey everybody, Publius, question for you. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Great. Do you guys, this is more of a philosophical question, do you guys consider yourselves the leaders of Beanstalk? I'm referring to Publius here.
No.
Okay. So then how do we think about whose responsibility it is to kind of get this thing off the ground? It's like, I understand what you guys are saying, and pardon me if this is mean, but like, we have people who are out tens to $100 million here, and like I get I've raised a ton of money in equity, and like this is to me not just an economics question. Like I get your point and that you guys are heartbroken, but to me this is a trust question. This is, should people trust you guys and this community and the protocol? And if there's no leader and if there's no group of people that's going to stand behind this, like how do we expect people to really continuing to put capital into this?
Well, to that point, while we were discussing what to do here in next steps, some of our community really emphasized the point back to us that Beanstalk is a protocol, and this was particularly in the context of the discussion of whether to disclose our identity, and their attitude was, well, Beanstalk is a protocol, and the protocol speaks for itself, and it's not about Publius, and we would agree with that. So at the same time, there does need to be. I mean, there's two separate points you really raised. One is about trust, and one is about how to move forward. With regards to trust, yeah, it's difficult, and this is an ugly situation, and there's nothing we can really do other than to try to be as transparent as possible, or at least that we were aware of, to boost any sort of trust in Beanstalk or the system in any way. So we're just trying to do our part to that point because we recognize how important that is. And with regards to kind of where to go, it's like, well, yeah, it's difficult to, in short, your point is well taken, that this is, a lot of people have lost a lot of money, and it's more than an economics question. It's a question of, well, how do we rebuild this? And think that the point is, Beanstalk, since it was deployed on mainnet, has been able to attract something like 50 contributors that are working constantly to make Beanstalk a reality. And the vast majority of them reached out to us today to say, we're ready to keep working on this stuff if you guys are. And our attitude is, economics aside, which again, from our perspective is the main question, economics aside, we're not going anywhere. And the main point of trust is, like, we want to say that as openly with our hands raised as possible, that we're not going anywhere. So recognize this is an ugly situation, and feel like the only way in ugly situations to instill trust is to be honest.
And I appreciate that. And I'll close it out now because I'm sure other people have questions. I'll just leave it with, candidly, like, I think that makes you guys leaders if you guys are running the team. And what I would have expected from you guys tonight is, hey, not I'm heartbroken, but I'm sorry, and we take accountability for what happened. Because what it seems like, basically nobody's taking accountability for this. And I get that sucks, but there's no way I'm putting a penny more in this thing unless somebody takes accountability. I'll leave it there. Thank you, guys.
Sorry you feel that way.
Okay. Next question is Rusty Gee, who is had to leave, but here. Beanstalk is international. Have you notified authorities in the EU, UK? Have you noticed Interpol cybercrimes divisions? Americans' only reliance on tracking hackers down is short-sighted.
Thus far, we've only reached out to the FBI, but we're inclined to reach out to any authorities that are relevant.
I'm actually typing that to him in the DM because he said for some reason he can't. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Next person up. Got Slapton Sherv.
Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Slapton.
All right, right on, dude. So is it the case right now that potentially, like, what are we gonna call this dude? The exploiter, I guess what his name would be, like, has a bunch of bean. Would that be correct? Or bunch of beans?
That is correct.
All right. So isn't it actually like a problem to restart this protocol without issuing another token because he could just dump if liquidity returns?
That's exactly correct. So this
All
would
right,
require a new contract to be deployed with new tokens.
Okay, right on. I think I missed that part. And then one more question, and this is more of a legal question. Is what this person did even illegal, considering there wasn't a hack or alteration or malicious code introduced into the code? He pretty much used the governance strategy or structure to his benefit. He or she.
Yeah, there's no doubt that this is a crime. There's a lot of money stolen from a lot of people.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Alrighty. John, and I'll give a new order since we're getting to the end of my list. Pull Bosky on stage as well.
I'm
Go ahead,
actually
John.
Smokey actually asked pretty much everything I wanted to ask. I did have one follow-up on that. I know you mentioned introducing putting things to a vote, but how are we going to be doing that if nobody has anything in the silo anymore? How are we going to vote?
Well, the basic idea would be that there's some sort of deployment of a new Beanstalk where there's a redistribution of stock based on the prior to the hack, or honestly, before that even happens, there could be a snapshot of stock prior to the attack and then a snapshot vote taken. So in terms of like immediate next steps, there's a way to probably just take a snapshot and get a straw poll from stockholders on what to do. But then in terms of long term, actually like taking decentralized steps to fix this and implement a fundraiser or whatever it may be, it's that would have to happen via a DAO, an on-chain vote, and all the stock is still on-chain. So there's nothing to be said for like why we can't do that currently. Now that you do have the problem of the beans, there's like a ton of beans owned by the attackers, so that's still outstanding, and therefore you probably still need to move to another chain. But the idea is that the stock distribution is not corrupted.
I see. And then I know I said I only had one question, but something else just popped up in my mind. Do we have the time?
Go ahead.
I kind of missed this, but I think you guys kind of published your names earlier. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. And we'll be publishing a statement with all that too as well.
And if you don't mind me asking, what type of background did you guys have? Do you have any sort of stake in other projects, or is Bean the only thing you're working on right now?
So Bean is the only thing we're working on. That might be an understatement. Like, this is our heart and soul.
Right.
Right. And with regards to our backgrounds, there are three of us. We basically we met at college at the University of Chicago. Brendan, who he has a computer science degree and an economics degree, and Michael has an economics degree, and I never graduated from college, but I was studying computer science. So that's our background basically.
And then one last question. Given all that has happened, did at any point, or were you at any point worried about this flash loan attack, or were you notified about it? I know people said in the chat that they did warn the dev team about this, but I mean, I'm not really sure if that's true or not. Just looking for kind of some sort of comment.
Yeah, so BIB 18 and 19, when they got proposed on chain, the website did display them, and to restate, that was the first time that there had been BIPs proposed that Beanstalk Farms was not aware of or a part of, and that was in and of itself eye raising, or eyebrow raising, and so we looked at it. It seemed a little bit weird. It was trying to donate beans to the Ukraine, and frankly, we didn't think much of it. We designed the governance structure to be secure against any sort of arbitrary attack, and we thought that it was secure, and it was not secure. So that we thought that it was, and that's basically what happened. But we looked at it and didn't think that there was anything to be scared of, and yeah, it's tough.
So
It's very
what was it, an oversight, I guess, on your part, or because as far as I understand, once it's been proposed, it can't really get modified, right?
I wouldn't say that it was an oversight. There's
I know we're all decentralized. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's
it's like
only on you, right? It's a vote at the end of the day. I'm just what I'm trying to understand is if it was out there for, I believe somebody said, over a month, right? How did nobody
what do
see
you mean a
this?
month. What was out there for a month?
The BIP.
No, this BIP was proposed yesterday.
Okay. So then that kind of changes. All right. Well, that's all I had then. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your questions, John.
Thanks, John. Next, we'll go with Bosby.
Hey guys, just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I know it's been a tough day. I don't have a lot of questions, but really just wanted to say, hey, it's good to hear your real voices. Wanted to just hear from both of you how you're doing, and just to let you know that, yeah, shit happens, but I'm very much here in your corner and want to help you rebuild Beanstalk.
Well, Asfi, we appreciate that tremendously. Yeah, today was a very not the best day. We've been making the joke for a long time when people ask us how we're doing. It's like, well, if beans are a peg, we're doing great. And that was not the case when we woke up this morning. So, yeah, we've been better and we've been worse. But frankly, the words that you're saying they're very humbling, that you, after what's gone on, you'd be interested in continuing to work on developing Beanstalk, and that's a sentiment that's been widely echoed to us over the past couple of hours. It's we're I think you guys know, based on the fact that we would spend our time working on something like this, that we're optimists, and that optimism has certainly been reinforced in many ways today. So thank you for your kind words, Asfi.
Last thing I'll say is, look, what you're attempting is a very hard problem. I mean, it's, the history of algo stables is littered with so many crashes. But I just want to say for myself, I get the vision, I get the need, I get the point that stable coins are this product market fit that you've talked about, and I get why, this technology that we've stumbled into needs like many more stable coins that are in great supply and will hopefully bring down borrowing costs. So yes, still very much aligned with you. And look, man, I'm a founder as well. Shit does happen, but all I just want to say is take care of yourselves, and yeah, let's rebuild this thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Asfi. That really that means a lot, and you're awesome. So thank you. Sync, you had a question that you were talking about in the chat. I think it was there were a lot of people who wanted to hear more. Do you want to propose your question or your sort of proposal that you had there, Sync?
Hey, yeah, Dumpling, do you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Great. Yeah, so yeah, Publius, thanks for coming out and just talking to everybody tonight. I was thinking about a path forward, potential path forward. My thought process is, if we're going to try to salvage this protocol, the path forward needs to be clear, and it needs to be something that potential VCs or whales or whoever would be incentivized to come and try to revisit. And one way I see that potentially happening is, as you stated, the exploiter has the funds at this point. We can't change that. And you mentioned that the stock could potentially be salvaged in a new reiteration of the protocol. So my thought process is, across the board, all silo depositors would retain their stock and seed. Potentially, if a VC said they want to cut that, or you know, we could determine that as you discuss with potential backers. But since the deposits are no longer in the contract and with the exploiter, the new revived Beanstalk would just have existing silo depositors retain their stock and seed into some capacity, such that new capital that comes in to salvage the protocol does not have to worry about existing silo depositors withdrawing and essentially new capital being their exit liquidity. That protocol could have a chance to kind of prove itself again. And if the protocol does reclaim peg and Bean reclaims peg and demand for Bean grows and the protocol mints again, well, existing silo depositors would have their allocation of farmable beans in accordance to their existing or whatever retained allocation of stock and seed that comes with the new revived Beanstalk. I can only see, me personally, I don't see any other path forward working except for this. And I say that because of the fact that you can perhaps 100% expect that anybody that comes in that's interested in potentially salvaging this doesn't want to be exit liquidity for everybody else. I think we can do this. I think the protocol, to me personally, I mean, the reason why I was attracted to it when I first discovered it at the end of last year, uh, the ethos and everything that comes with it reminded me of the early days of Ethereum. Working with everybody here in the community, talking to everybody here. There's just not a lot of projects in DeFi right now that embody that ethos. I think it's pretty obvious by the audience here with almost 500 users that people want to see what a path forward would look like. This is one option that I think would potentially work and that new capital would be interested in. Sign me up for it. I'm just putting my name out there. As far as I'm concerned, my silo deposit is already gone. But if I have a chance to retain some allocation of my stock and seed, well, so be it. And that's the price I'd be willing to pay if it means that new capital doesn't have to worry about me being their exiting on their liquidity. So that's just my 2 cents. And I hope that the community can get on board with that because I don't really see too many other options at this point. We can still continue to try to pursue the exploiter in the various methodologies that we're considering, but we need to be practical here. We don't have much negotiating power. And nevertheless, I think the DeFi community is going to look at this protocol and they're going to say, if this community can sign up for this as a collective, then this is something worth salvaging. If Ethereum could overcome the DAO fork, we can overcome this. That's just my 2 cents.
Agree with a lot of what you said, Syncubate, and we think there's a lot of elegance to the idea of what you're proposing, right? To date, the only way to acquire stock is to buy and deposit whitelisted assets, and those whitelisted assets have now been stolen, but there's nothing to be said for your stock has been forfeited, right? And so there, in theory, yeah, what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. And I hope that the community could get behind that because I think, and again, there's no need to rush in this, but I would appreciate people's feedback. And, hopefully if we have a town hall or community call on Tuesday, as we've typically done, we can maybe revisit this. But I would be, appreciative of others' feedback and a potential path forward here. And I was actually inspired by, I see Mark is up here on the stage now. Mark said it earlier in the Discord. Ethereum overcame the DAO fork, and we can overcome this. We're not, this can be done, but we're gonna have to take some bitter medicine right now. But if that's what we have to all do, then so be it. We've already taken it. The exploiter has the money, right? We can't change that. But what we can change is the methodology and the path forward that we pursue here, and the signal that we send to the rest of the DeFi community, to VCs, to big whales, etc., that this is a project worth saving. There's a community and there's a brand behind it. And I would encourage everybody to stand by that because multiple options are just not going to look good, in my opinion, to VCs. They're not going to want to deal with rage quit option, this haircut option, that haircut option. It should just be a strict across the board. This is everybody's what we're going to do. We're going to reboot as is from this point, and let's just do it. That's just my suggestion, and I appreciate everybody's feedback. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thanks for Thanks for coming up. Leave that one there. And Mark, you were on the queue earlier, and I think you left and came back. So
thank you, mate. Would just say, we're excited to participate in that discussion, and as always, we know that you've got lots of thoughts to add. And on I think on Tuesday, our intention is to have class as normal to continue this discussion, basically.
okay, great. Mark, go ahead. Mark, can't hear you if you're speaking. We'll let you get your mic sorted, and then we'll go to Kid Quartz for now. Quartz?
Yeah, so to reiterate everyone else's thoughts, I'm sure you guys have had a really rough day. I think we all have. I guess one question that's still lingering for me is, would this have been possible to execute in the wheat bean uni pool? Because per the point about auditing through BIP7, it seems like they did point out flash loan prone LP evaluation. And obviously you guys use pretty unique governance mechanisms, right? Like typically you accrue governance tokens with some sort of outrageous APR or APY over a time period. The fact that you get all your stock immediately and are allowed to vote immediately sort of set you guys up to be prone to this. And so I just wanted to ask, like, is it the virtual pricing on Curve that made it possible? I haven't looked at that much into the exploit. Seems like there's a lot of complexity between like BIP 18 and BIP 19 interacting with one another. The contract that was generated during the time of the transaction. And I don't blame you guys at all.
So the short answer is,
I certainly didn't anticipate it as an investor, So yeah, I understand it's a hard time.
It's a great question. So the substantive answer is that the Curve BDV function that is used for both the Bean3 Curve pool and the Bean LUSD pool was not the issue or the problem. What was a problem is the amount of Beanstalk assets that were liquid in liquidity pools as a percentage of the total assets. And so if you ask, why didn't this exploit happen before it did? Well, over the past week, there's been a dramatic increase in the liquidity in all the pools and also the percentage of beans in the liquidity pools, if that makes sense. And so because what the attacker needed to do was acquire 67% of the total stock, which if there, the basic point is, as the liquidity increased as a percentage of the total bean supply, that facilitated the acquiring of more stock. At a smaller liquidity to bean supply ratio, the idea is you basically can't apply the attack because you can't acquire 2/3 of the total stock because it's not in the liquidity pools to acquire, basically, if that makes sense. But because of the dramatic increase in liquidity recently, that changed.
Your point is because of the natural accrual of stock over time, you could have had 100% of the liquidity at one point, or obviously not actually 100%, but there's no amount that you could have inflated it such that you would have been able to have a super majority in the governance proposals, because that doesn't quite ring true to me.
Well,
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's that there wasn't enough liquidity in the pools to acquire enough bean-denominated value to deposit in a flash loan, if that makes sense. Because as you buy beans or add liquidity on one side, the price changes, and therefore the BDV changes, right? And so if you're trying to do this atomically, there's a limit to how much you can do before changing the BDV too much, such that you can no longer acquire enough stock effectively. So there had to be the right conditions where there was enough liquidity relative to the bean supply for this to happen. And prior to the past week, there was not sufficient liquidity to facilitate this attack.
Interesting. Okay. That makes sense. I got to do it out on paper or in a spreadsheet. Yeah, the other thing I would say is, or one thing I'm curious about is look, man, we all had a rough day. Lost several $1 million today. I get it. That's fine. At the end of the day, I think what you guys have created is really special. The protocol is really unique. That's why I've taken the time to tweet about it. That's why the time I've spent engaging with friends about it, I think it's been worthwhile. And I get that it sucks as an LP to just sort of lose your bags. But I think what you guys have conceptually is super interesting. might not make more sense at this point to just cut bait. Don't reward any of the former LPs. And believe me, I'm one of them, and it's going to hurt a lot. But preserve the concept. It feels like trying to compensate former LPs by hunting for venture money. And believe me, I've been on the phone with fund managers, seeing if there'd be anyone that would bite at something like this. Is going to be a really, really difficult challenge when you're basically forcing other funds to buy things. So why not just say, like, fuck it, the community's special, the ideas are special, the products we can develop down the line are special. We got hit with a governance exploit that basically nobody anticipates. But the PEG maintenance mechanisms are still beautiful and wonderful, and I love the idea. Let's just start a new thing rather than trying to tie a dinghy to the Titanic as it sinks,
And there really is something to be said for that. Ultimately, we kind of are at the behest of the community and the DAO, and we're going to work on whatever the DAO wants to do moving forward. So understand it may not be... I mean, the DAO may ultimately decide they want to launch some sort of fork or migrate the contract and keep all the stock in the pods or all the stock and not the... Right? There's a million iterations here. And to your point, there is a lot to be said of the elegance of just, deploying a contract with fixed governance to fix this exploit, and basically deploy it from scratch. There would obviously have to be some sort of new deployment mechanism, because at this point there'd be a lot of expectation around the system, so you wouldn't really expect the season of plenty to be enough per se. So it would take a little bit of time to get that right anyways. But the short answer is, Kid Courts, at least in the short term, like the next 24 to 48 hours, definitely think it makes sense to pursue seeing if there's demand to kind of backstop this thing. And the real thing that they'd be buying would be the credit history of Beanstalk. And if you can resuscitate Beanstalk, via some sort of on-chain process, there's a lot to be said for coming back from the dead vampire mode as a protocol, right? So don't want to pursue like launching from scratch until we've pursued seeing if there's anything else we can do here. But to your point, totally acknowledge that.
Yeah, understood. And I want to say, look, everyone knows when they go into DeFi that they take risks in their portfolio, and it's not your responsibility to manage everyone else's risks. So I hope you guys don't beat yourself up too much about this. You're clearly smart guys. Keep up the hard work. I have nothing but respect for what happened, or for you guys. And, it's a tough situation. Keep on keeping on. Admire your perseverance.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so guys, Mark Jeffrey here. Really shitty day, as we all know. But I want to commend you all for coming forward. You could have run like cowards. You didn't. You came into a chat room and used your voices, and you doxed yourselves. And that's not a small thing. So first of all, I just want to commend you on that. Second of all startups have some super shitty day like this, like no matter what kind of startup it is. With Uber, sometimes it involved drivers doing horrific things to passengers, right? So at least it wasn't something like that, right? So, put it in perspective. Third of all, just in thinking about this, when I was sort of thinking it through in my mind this morning when I woke up and, saw what happened, the pod mechanism indeed does provide a futures mechanism with which this thing could possibly be rebooted. But it does seem to need some sort of infusion of cash for liquidity. I heard you mention earlier that you thought 50 million was kind of the low bar for that. Do you think it could be done with less? Could you do it with 10 million or 20 million, something like that, do you think?
So Rome is, it's impossible to build Rome back in a day. And even if you had, let's say, a magic wand and suddenly $50 million to backstop this thing, you really wouldn't want to put it all in to the liquidity pools immediately, because that, again, to get to earlier people's points, there's some people that want to rage quit and sell their beans at a discount, and it's very important that however the system gets rebooted, there's an opportunity for those people to rage quit at a cent, and at 10 cents, and at 50 cents, and at 90 cents. So there's a balance between facilitating people to, if you want to call it rage quitting or selling their beans at a steep discount, with not exacerbating the negative feedback loop, if that makes sense, that comes with a loss of faith. And so the balance that needs to be stricken is that there needs to be some sort of announcement of capital and some strategy as to how it's going to be deployed into the system. But then the way it needs to be deployed is such that, there's no immediate return to the peg, if that makes sense, because that would facilitate a really inefficient deployment if you consider that lots of people are probably going to want to sell their beans below $1.
Yeah, I totally hear that. You probably have to reissue beans as a different coin or something like that.
Correct. That's going to have to happen.
Yeah. Okay, well, guys, I'm cheering for you. I love the mechanism that you've built. So I'm really hoping that you do find some way forward. And thank you for continuing to try to find a way forward and not just running away and quitting.
We are not quitters. That we are not.
Smokey, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So, Publius, again, my apologies to bash the idealists in you, but when it comes to, I guess, earlier, you said we'll take whatever approach the DAO favors in this kind of, right, or some paraphrasing of that. Do you think that now is the time to double down on DAO infrastructure / the will of the many when it's sort of a execute in the moment, like full court press, as JDP seems to be saying and is a fan of saying, sort of situation? Do you think that is what will result in things getting done? Because in my mind, there's two courses of action. One is what stays sort of pure or true to the vision. The other is probably what has the highest expected value of everyone who lost money today and or is long-term bullish on Bean in its current embodiment, becoming whole. And I think that they kind of diverge at this point, which is to say, does the DAO take control, or does the DAO trust Publius to take control?
Well, ultimately, think that there is a harmony there, and we and many of the people that have reached out to us at Beanstalk Farms, to say full court press might be an understatement. It'll be like the last 2 minutes in the final four. This is crunch time, to say the least. But substantively, really don't think that there is a disconnect between things being able to be executed and things being done where there's decentralized consensus. And ultimately, we recognize that no matter what action is taken at this point, there's going to be a lot of people that are unhappy with what's done. And so at this point, the question is, how can we, what's the best way forward for everyone together collectively? And the community is really the thing that makes Beanstalk strong. And so if the community is willing to move forward with, that's really the main thing that will determine whether Beanstalk is successful. To answer you explicitly, do we think it's time to double down on the principles and stuff? It's not about doubling down. This is what it's all about. The system is strong because of the fact that there are so many people that care about its success. Today we were pulled up off the ground by the people that we've been working with for months, and reminded that this is a long battle, or a long war that is not lost. And while the battle today was certainly lost, the war is not lost. And to answer, to get at what we're really trying to get at here, Smokey, we doxed ourselves because of that. We mean business. This is not a joke to us. This is fucked. Today, what happened today is horrible. And so our intention is to do everything we can to try to fix it. But we are just 3 individuals, and we truly do believe that what makes Beanstalk so strong and successful is the diverse set of people that are participating. And the hope is to conduct ourselves in a way where going forward, that is not lost. And even if there are certainly some people that are going to hop off the bandwagon as soon as humanly possible, that's okay. And it's really just about figuring out how to in short order do that. But at the same time, just want to recognize, let's say there was, you know, 50 or $100 million that appeared out of nowhere right now, we would not be ready to unpause Beanstalk. Like, it's going to take a couple of weeks until we feel like we have done our homework, and Beanstalk Farms has done our homework such that this exploit and anything similar to it is covered. And you know, that's essential. So recognize that everyone wants resolution here in short order. Don't think that's realistic, frankly, and that's unrelated to the full court press, which we are mounting in full steam. So you know, there is a little bit of a friction there, but think there's some harmony we're going to be able to hopefully get at together.
Yeah, that's fair. And look, I respect you guys for coming out and, you know, basically putting yourselves at risk / putting, like, you know, your faith forward by saying, look, here's who I am, right? That's what a lot of people, including myself, doesn't have the balls to do, right? So, like, good on you. I just think that there's also, like, you know, as people famously say, do you want to be right or do you want to make money? I think that also kind of, you know, comes into play here, along with, like, there isn't any glory in doing things the hard way is what I'm getting at. And we've seen how DAO bloat and or like slow decision making has killed many a startup in the past, and that's sort of, I think, what I model being closest to right now, right? So I guess all I would ask is that, you know, yes, please take advantage of the community and you know, learn as much as you can and squeeze as many great ideas out of the people there. Just don't let the idea of being a DAO slow down execution, because we've seen that kill great projects in the past and kill the momentum that is sort of the lifeblood of DeFi, as I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it is just important to acknowledge, though, that we're not in charge and have never positioned ourselves as in charge of Beanstalk, and we do think it would be wrong to, at this point in time, to start to like wave a magic wand and act like that is the case. And so, if anything, the goal is to evaluate collectively, and we're also going to be racking our brains and leveraging our networks and seeing what we can do. But the idea is to come up with a set of 3 or 4 different viable options moving forward, depending on the available capital and situation, and basically, you know, propose A, B, C, or D. And as those options become apparent and what they are, don't think that will, you know, I think the goal is once we figure out what A, B, and C, and D are, it'll be possible for everyone to vote on A, B, C, and D. But in the short term, feel like we gotta all work together to figure out what those are. And we're not in charge. So it's hard for us to just say, oh, this is what's going to happen. It's not really, you know, it's not the way things happen.
Yeah, fair enough, man. Look, best of luck, and you know, I'm in the corner if there's anything I can ever do to help. So thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. And Smokey, just want to say we appreciate your input tremendously, and really hope that you're part of the process and discussion and stuff, you know, as we figure this all out together.
I would like say something real fast.
GDP, I think you're up right after Harvey. We'll let
Oh, I'm sorry.
Harvey.
Hey.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Cool. Well, it's funny, when I first started to sign up to talk, you know, it goes like a lot of the stuff I wanted to talk about started to be covered by the next 3 speakers. So anyway, I first want to say, you know, I'm really impressed so far. I'm really happy with how you're handling things. Like, you know, the doxing is a very strong first step. I like the idea of being meticulous with weighing the options. That's another thing that's always drawn me to the project. I think there's really something special here. What I felt like this analogy, which is kind of crappy, but it's kind of like if we live in a horse-drawn carriage world and you guys invented the first car, and then someone came along and like cut the brake lines, and then if you were to throw it away or the market threw it away, that's like saying, well, cars are just stupid because that one crashed. And it's like, well, no, it's just fix the brake lines, and cars are way better than horse-drawn carriages. And I think what you guys have made for DeFi and for algo-backed dollars is like the automobile in a horse-drawn carriage world. It's just incredible, superior tech. I've been pretty much obsessed since I found it in November, and I've been as excited about Bean as I was when I first found Bitcoin in 2012. And so with that said, I also really, really appreciate the diligence you guys, from everything I've seen, you really do sort of run like mathematical scenarios to run your governance to make sure that the algorithms do govern it and keep it stable, and like kind of consider and weigh each thing that is the next step. And so I kind of I still have the full faith that you're going to continue to do that here. I think the main thing that made me raise my hand was just at the beginning, the concern about liquidity. I just, my 2 cents was I didn't think liquidity would be that difficult, even despite the setback today. Like, I feel like between something like a fundraiser thing where you have just a new pod line issuance or something like that, combined with the fact that from the people in my circles, I feel like there's enough true believers that they'd be happy to just be getting in a silo early, because when you're in the silo early, they're going to be getting the rewards and the bigger proportion of rewards, so it'll kind of naturally attract liquidity because it's proven itself for what it is. It was on a tear, but before this happened, it was like the world was waking up to the wonder that is the protocol, and it looked like it was just going to keep attracting liquidity because it is such a superior product, and people were starting to really realize that and understand the mechanics of it, and why the world needs cheap, non-collateralized stable coins. And anyway, so I think, yeah, with the setback and the reputation of having a exploit happen, it can be a bit of a setback, but it's on this is more like akin to something like Satoshi inventing Bitcoin or something. Like, the technology that's been created is so special that it's like if when Satoshi first created Bitcoin, if someone magically made a super secret miner that 51% attacked it, but like it could recover from that, and I don't want people to lose sight of the
Harvey, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think yeah, we want to get to more questions here. But we echo your sentiment. Really appreciate your support in this hard time.
Yeah, I had questions kind of before, but then people asked them, so then I just sort of started rambling because
it's okay. I understand. I think we're all kind of fried. I get it.
Yeah, it's been a long day.
I'm gonna move now real quick. There was in the town hall chat. There was okay. We had basically Publius. What should have been done to prevent this? If we can go back in time. 24, 48 hours. How could we set ourselves up in the future so things like this don't happen?
Well, there needs to be flash loan resistance built into governance, and that was what was attacked, and that needs to be fixed. So, yeah.
And do we have a clear path for that?
The short answer is yes. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's brutal because it's not technically hard to fix. It's just like it just wasn't part of the protocol.
Gotcha. the airbag was turned off in the passenger seat or something. You could just click, yeah. Okay, Unbinksy. You're next up.
Hey everybody. Publius core team, really sad to hear what happened. I've been affected, everybody's been affected. Tough day. That said, I am floored at the community response and just amazed at, kind of the initiative that various community members and core contributors have taken to find a way forward. So that gives me a strong signal that, this is something worth fighting for. In addition, the reason I got into Bean is the economic design. It feels strong, and to date it hasn't been proven wrong. So there is still a lot to explore in this problem space. That said,
let's prove it right. This is the biggest shitstorm imaginable. Let's prove it right. Let's put the Band-Aid on and let's let the model work its magic. So, there's a lot of work to be done to get that to happen, but we were also floored by the response today from the community. I mean, holy smokes.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you. I think I all for whatever path we choose. I'd like to be involved and help you brainstorm. One thing I'd like to bring up and something I'm mulling over is the extent of how much on-chain governance played a role in this exploit. And, when I think about on-chain governance in DeFi and crypto in general, I feel like we collectively are not ready for fully on-chain governance system. And part of the problem is that it introduces exploits like this, things that we can't predict until it's already happened. And so with that in mind, I'm curious how you're thinking about governance and what changes you're thinking about making to governance going forward.
Well, again, the flash loan resistance to governance is really the substantive change that needs to be made at first glance. To your point about on-chain governance as a whole not being at the state that it needs to be, evidently so. But don't necessarily think that's reason to kind of back away from the concept of on-chain governance. And if the goal is to really have a truly autonomous protocol, which Beanstalk is designed to be, then you need on-chain governance. And so, at least from our perspective, we'd be more inclined to try to take this as a major learning opportunity and build the most robust on-chain governance system possible as a response to this, basically.
Yes. One thing. Okay, so I'll leave it up to you to think about. But my understanding was that you were using custom governor contract. I've been told that there's the regular governor contract actually has this built in, this fail safe against attacks. And so if we do want to consider on-chain governance and making minimal changes going forward, then we really need to think of this as the most important project to solve. How is next iteration of Bean going to be governed? And how do we minimize the potential for exploit? What exists today and what minimal changes do we have to make, if any, to make sure that we use systems that have already been simulated, hacked, and audited so that we minimize this going forward?
Yeah, it's a great point. A question I'm sure everyone will be considering as we evaluate.
Okay, from the chat there was, how did this go from a BIP with 250K to Ukraine, all of a sudden, to draining, all the liquidity? What were those? Can you just explain that a little bit more?
So there were 2 BIPs that were proposed back to back and one of the BIPs was verified on Etherscan to donate to the Ukraine, basically, and it seemed like both of the BIPs were actually the same BIP. That was what it seemed like. And so it was relatively innocuous from that perspective because it seemed like they had just proposed the same BIP to mint beans to the Ukraine twice. And that's why it didn't really raise any flags.
Okay, I think we have Plastic Bean. I think you were up next.
Thank you, Dumpling. First of all, thank you, Publius. Thank you, Dumpling, and thank you to the whole team for coming forward and putting this together. I really appreciate it. I've been following Beanstalk for a long time now. My one question is if one of the solutions is to deploy a new contract and issue new tokens, what will happen to the current pod line? Are you guys going to default on the debt, or you will somehow transfer it over to the new contract?
That's basically an open question that will be, is one of those substantive things we hope that the DAO will vote on. That will be certainly part of the options that are, need to be voted on.
Okay, thank you.
AJ, you're up next. AJ, we can't hear you. You might have to leave and come back. For now, I'm going to move to Dr. Beans.
Hey guys, yeah, just
we'll get AJ when
coming,
he comes back on.
You guys can hear me, yeah?
A few more folks.
Yeah, what's up, Dunks?
Oh yeah, yeah. So just echoing like pretty much everyone's sentiment. Yeah, rough day. Still 100% like believe in the vision, the mission, and I think that what I wanted to say was from my perspective, and this could be kind of obviously probably is wrong, but from my perspective, the $75 million roughly.
Callius.
Dumpling, not sure if there's a problem on your end, but people are listening to Dunks.
Hi guys.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dunks, please continue.
Yeah. So from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was roughly $75 million of stable coins and ETH, like basically stolen from the protocol, right?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah. So what my idea or suggestion is, or just more, it's more the way I'm looking at it. It just occurred to me that from my perspective, if I was, obviously some of that was mine, not a lot, but if I would be happy to be moved to the front of the pod line, like I would be happy for that $75 million to be moved to the front of the pod line. And basically the protocol, in that sense, the protocol would owe 75 million beans to those people who lost $75 million. And then if there was a way to kickstart liquidity, then it seems to me that the current situation is the pod line is 650 million. So really all we're doing is we're adding an extra 75 million to that pod line. To me, that does not seem like an insurmountable obstacle. People were, to me, it doesn't actually seem that huge if we can solve the liquidity issue. So I just wondering what you guys think about that, and would it be possible to move, like, say, the people who lost actual money, Because obviously a lot of the pod line was people who
The
lent.
only difficulty is that the pod line is like ordered, and so it's a question of like how do you order different people in the silo, which is fungible or stockholders are equivalent to some extent. But the short answer is the point that you're really getting at is very clearly that there is a lot of different reason to be optimistic here, and so it's unclear exactly what the right solution is, but you know, we like you are optimistic there's a path forward here.
Yeah, no, awesome. That's just kind of, yeah, that my feeling is that we've lost $75 million. The protocol in some sense owes that, but we have a pod line which is basically represents what the protocol owes. I for one happy to be included in that pod line. It would be cool if it was at the start, but you know, to me that's kind of, it's like the broad strokes of where we're at, and it doesn't seem insurmountable.
It could be another pod line. Like there's a lot of different things to do here. There's a lot of different things to do here.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. That was all I wanted to say.
Okay. Next we'll go foo.eu,
Does this work?
and then we'll.
Does this work?
Oh, AJ, you're on. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hey. So wow. Publius, nice to hear your voice. Like, you know, I'm not going to waste time on all the politics bits. I hope everybody's, you know, in good health. I've seen y'all through a lot of phases. I haven't always been super involved, but I've seen Beanstalk move through a lot of phases, and I'm super in awe of what has been accomplished despite this sort of atomic tragedy that's occurred today, this point issue. It's just amazing. This I'm totally sold on it. And every time that, you know, I thought that there was no way you guys could come back, you've come back. And so I just don't listen to that doubt anymore. A lot of people have, you know, asked really good questions and posed really good concerns, looking backwards, looking forwards, their concerns, their questions, their suggestions. And I'm like super impressed by the community. I would like to know, I have like some general concerns about what the Beanstalk Farms organization will look like going forward. I know that you said that you've gotten a lot of support from your group. And I think that what you've stated is that you continue to plan on working on this for full time. I think we all have a lot of hope, but I would like, if there's, you know, anything more to address there, I would, you know, I'd like to hear it addressed. And yeah, I mean, other than that, like, you know, the other thing is what do you need? What do you need from us? I mean, you know, this has been about, we heard your apology and the empathy and your commitment to moving forward. So how can the community help the community make sure that we bring this incredible concept back to life? So those are my two questions. Like, what do you need from us? And also just maybe some commentary on like what Beanstalk Farms looks like operationally moving forward.
Yeah, it's unclear. I mean, Beanstalk Farms, everyone was basically paid, you know, via, there was the BIPs to mint the beans to fund the development, and basically the beans are currently worthless. So everyone from Beanstalk Farms that wants to continue working on Beanstalk, it remains unclear, you know, how to best do that. But you know, the short answer is people who are going to keep working on Beanstalk Farms are going to do it more or less on a voluntary basis.
Right. Okay. And yeah, I mean, if there's anything that you need from the community, I don't know. That's the only thing, you know, what can we do? What can we do for Beanstalk Farms? What can we do for Beanstalk?
We gotta figure this out together. So the short answer is by Tuesday, the hope is during class to have, you know, some sort of substantive ideas we can start to discuss. we'll see where we're at on the capital front. And so those are really the two main things. It's like, what's the best way to set this up, and then like actually try to raise the liquidity, and then where do we source it from? So what's the structure of it, and then how do we actually source it? Those are the two main questions at the moment.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, AJ. Okay, next, foo.eth. If you're not near a mic, you can go to Callius. Did you go? Or DevBear?
Hi guys, I'm Carlis, and hi Publius. I have a background in back audit distribution and enforcement, and I'd like to ask a question about Jack Niewold. Will after this exploit will
I'm
Jack
sorry.
Niewold still?
It's a little hard. It's a little hard to hear you.
Jack Niewold. I have a question about Jack Niewold. Will after this exploit will he still be able to buy his color house and go private?
I'm sorry, you're going a little bit in and out, and so it's a little hard to hear your question.
Do you guys know Jack Niewold?
Do we know him? Only on Twitter.
Okay, so after this exploit, will he still be able to?
I didn't understand that.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think it was a joke. But yeah, we'll go to DevBear.
Hey guys, how's it going? I just had a couple of questions kind of from a technical perspective. The first of which was kind of your guys' motivation for having the protocol have full like basically governance to have pretty much God mode into kind of the one contract that based on the diamond pattern, how it delegates out to all the other BIPs and additions. The idea behind allowing that to execute arbitrary call data with no restrictions whatsoever, specifically on user funds that have been deposited. And the second question was, why wasn't the call data on the governance proposal checked for over 24 hours before it was executed?
So to answer the former question, the desire to have a fully on-chain governance system was effectively such that the system could really run autonomously. And go ahead.
Sorry, it's just my feedback. You're good.
Oh, no problem. And so, like from a principle perspective, like why could the governance execute arbitrary code? Well, the short answer is the Beanstalk, when it was originally deployed, like it wasn't working. Like it took the BIPs that were implemented in order to make Beanstalk continue to work. And the structure of what changes would need to be made to Beanstalk at the time that it was deployed, it was very unclear to us what would need to be changed and what would not need to be changed, if that makes sense. And just from a practical perspective, it really was like a necessity for the system to be able to be changed somewhat arbitrarily. And then the hope was that the structure of the governance system was sufficiently secure to accept arbitrary execution of code, because the BIPs wouldn't be executed unless people people supported the BIPs. And so the benefit of doing the on-chain governance is really to facilitate that. And to answer your second question as to why the on-chain call data was not looked at, the short answer is, it's unclear. It's unclear what. I mean, the short answer is, don't.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if one of the members that had access to the emergency stop had looked at the call data before it was executed, this could have been prevented, correct?
Honestly, that's unclear to us at the time.
Well,
And
wouldn't if the emergency stop was pulled before the call data was executed, the call data would have reverted when the governance proposal executed?
correct, but your question was whether from reviewing the on-chain call data, it would have been possible to determine whether there was an attack happening, and that's the thing that's unclear.
That's fair enough. Yeah, it just seems a little bit negligent that the team did not do that due diligence and let, there was confusion around it. People were confused that no one from the team, executed the call data on a local fork of mainnet on their machine and see what happened. Because what you could have done is you could have simulated, had you just like Ganache CLI can just fork like mainnet state, you could have executed that call data on your local machine and watched the curve pool get drained. So yeah, that's just kind of my question. I'm not trying to press you guys or anything, but as someone also building a protocol, these are the type of things that we kind of looked for, around simulations and testing to see these kind of measures. So something even fuzz testing this, but most importantly, just literally forking mainnet and executing the call data locally, you would have seen that this happened. So just for your going forward, any other security considerations that you guys have, that's one thing that I've always thought, for executing on-chain call data and having a time lock, having someone whose responsibility is simply to just run it locally and see what happens. Seems like that would be important. Because call data like this, definitely would have been able to detect that in advance.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of learning lessons to be learned here, and Beanstalk didn't have a head of security or someone that was responsible for testing the BIPs, and so yeah, this is one of those things that in a decentralized capacity, it's everyone can point fingers, and yeah, it stinks.
Now, the other question, just to kind of follow up on that, is why, what was the reasoning for governance, the governance basically call data or any BIP to have full access to the LP positions in the pool and to be able to send them to arbitrary addresses and move tokens arbitrarily? From a protocol design perspective, the only person that should be able to remove an asset like that from the pool should be the person that deposited it. So governance, the way I've kind of learned protocol design, it should only be.
Let's take an example. Let's take an example where the curve pool for the Bean3 curve pool has an A parameter of 10, and let's say instead of going through curve governance to change the A parameter from 10 to 100, Beanstalk Farms deploys a new pool and then proposes basically via governance to immediately migrate any deposited liquidity from the curve pool with an A parameter of 10 to an A parameter of 100. And so there's there's just some practical things that you'd want to be able to do that in hindsight you may say, well, at the margin it's not worth it. But that was the thinking.
Couldn't you just add a list of approved addresses, a mapping of approved addresses within the Diamond contract that says governance is allowed to move tokens from here to here via a specific, you could have a specific token moving function that checks to see am I pulling this token from somewhere that's allowed, and am I moving to somewhere that's allowed? And you could just whitelist that new curve pool. It just seemed kind of strange that the protocol design allowed for arbitrary moving of tokens from one arbitrary location to another with arbitrary call data executed permissionlessly. It just feels a little bit I'm not trying to press you guys. I'm just as someone who is really deep into this stuff, it just seems a little bit just confusing why it was designed like that. And I just want to get your thoughts on if there was another, if that was the reason why that was done, or if there was a more I don't know. I don't really know what I'm asking at this point, but why was it implemented that way, and did anyone didn't see that?
I will say you definitely are pressing them, but that's also okay. I think that this is a forum for that, so that's good. I guess I would say, when are you open to to helping us as we make any changes to this, because it seems like you're highly qualified for this sort of thing.
It's not particularly something I have time to look in. I'm just trying to get a consolation of why these things weren't discussed internally, and why the audit firms that have audited Beans in the past, if it has been audited, missed something like this It just feels very kind of strange. And if I was like a community member who didn't understand this stuff, it's like having a very like concrete, solid answer as to why like governance could arbitrarily move my money at any time seems like something I would like want to have an answer for.
Yeah, I mean, respectfully, no one has raised this with us to date. Obviously, now's the time to raise it. But yeah, I mean, if you have questions about why the white paper and the protocol, the goal is to make that as upfront as possible that arbitrary code could be executed via BIPs. But recognize that that might not be the best way to draw it up.
For sure. Yeah, that's about all the questions I have. I guess like the only question I have forward have you guys discussed internally, like from a code perspective, anything that you plan to improve on or like architecturally. A lot of the discussion throughout the day today was really focused on governance. And how it was like governance's fault that this was, this happened. They're saying like, oh, on-chain governance bad, let's move to off-chain, et cetera, et cetera. But from my understanding, it looks like it was a failure of software architecture, not a failure of on-chain governance. And I feel like a lot of people were pointing fingers at on-chain governance saying it's bad. So I just want to get your thoughts on, if there's anything you guys have talked about that keeps on-chain governance, because it seems like removing it for the sake of removing it is just like, we don't want to write the code to do it properly.
Well, we just removed it currently to prevent any additional exploits effectively. But that's not to say that we think that there shouldn't be on-chain governance going forward in any way.
Cool. Makes sense. Thank you guys for answering those questions. That's about all I have.
Yeah, appreciate your questions very much.
I think I brought on Sages and Tyler Burden. We'll go with Sages first. Tyler, if you're near your mic, why don't you go ahead as well? Okay.
Hi guys, can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, thank you for doing this. I've been following Beanstalk for a while. I really want to see it succeed, and today was not a great day. I just want to follow up on a question that was asked earlier about defaulting the pods. The pod line is about 700 million now. It just feels like a little bit odd as a proposal solution to move forward. Especially after we lost money in the silo, it means that we may lose our pods as well. I just want to know if that's something that is being considered for real or not.
Well, I think everything is on the table, and the everything ranges from just launching a new diamond contract that's totally unencumbered by any sort of previous obligations, to trying to honor 100% of the current obligations in some form. So that's, again, like Beanstalk is nothing without the community. And so at the end of the day, it's really a question of which is, and this is going to be an uphill battle, whatever is the course we all choose to take. The point is the community's got to gear up for that uphill battle, and we're not really in a position to say whether the pod should be, because again, if you have to migrate to a new Beanstalk contract, then the question is, do you also migrate the pod obligation? And so it's really it is just a question, and it can happen or not. But there's no right answers at the moment. This is a shitty situation, and there are no right answers.
Okay. It just feels like, I don't know, maybe it's just being a little, it's been a little difficult today to lose money on the silo, but it just feels like, that losing money as well in the pods, that, it's not a great solution, but okay. I mean.
Yeah, no one wants to lose money. Agree.
Well, Tyler, I think, you can be part of those conversations. We're going to have several more. This isn't the only one, right? So Sages next. All right, not sure you're there. I invited a few more people to speak. Smokey's back.
GM Kings, back again. So one quick question, and I asked this to, I think, to probably understand how we're internally thinking about positioning in front of VC, et cetera, at the moment. But if you're sort of on the other side of the table and you're evaluating why to, fund Bean versus fund a fork at this point, because inevitably the narratives within like the next week or two will be like I would not be surprised if we see a series of Bean forks. How does what's the incentive for a third party to inject liquidity here apart from the community?
It's the credit history. That's the short answer. It's you're buying into the credit history.
What part of that matters?
Well, the fact that Beanstalk has a history of paying back its debt is not insignificant. And furthermore, if you consider what actually killed all of the previous attempts at credit-based stablecoins, they never really made it out of the launch phase, if that makes sense. And so,
right.
But just to complete the statement, even if you say like a new Beanstalk is the way to go, the launch question is very much unanswered, and at this point, don't really think that the current model would be prepared for a launch into such publicity, if that makes sense. So it's like you can fork Beanstalk, but that's, I mean, frankly, don't even necessarily think that that's like the position you want to be in. I mean, obviously you have a lot of obligations in the current Beanstalk, but if you have no obligations, that's how you get into season of plenty territory and inorganic demand. And there's a lot to be said for the alpha here if Beanstalk, the current version of Beanstalk, is able to attract enough lenders to come back from the debt. That's the short answer. So that's the positioning.
Fair. I don't mean to belittle what Beanstalk's accomplished because it's quite significant, right? I'm just saying that at this point, the major risk which people are worried about, which is can you create a protocol like this that pays out and actually prints over time? You guys have kind of de-risked that, right, in the eyes of what is possible versus what isn't possible. So I do get your point around the credit history, but I also do wonder if and I'm just saying this again, speaking from a devil's advocate point of view, how do you? It feels like a really tough statement to make objective claims around in terms of there's no way to do a clean cold launch with appropriately managed or effectively
agree with that 100%. We would just say despite being in a horrible position at the moment, we welcome the competition. Like Beanstalk,
that's good. I respect that.
Beanstalk is better for the competition.
Okay, I think we have Cloverglow.
Hey, can you hear me? I have a pair of questions for you. First, earlier in the call, you mentioned that you didn't feel like you were the leaders of Beanstalk. Do you feel like do you feel like you can represent the protocol to VCs? I think they'll be looking for someone who can speak for the protocol. They won't be looking for a highly decentralized process. So how do you think you can present yourself to a potential large investor?
Well, we're here. We just raised our hands. We just doxed ourselves. So the short answer is, while we don't intend to be, as has been the case for a very long time, we don't intend to be the sole voice talking to people about Beanstalk. In fact, while this call's been going on, we've been getting a ton of texts from people saying, hey, I talked to so-and-so, and, you know, there's a lot of people saying they're going to put money in. It's like, there's a lot of chatter, and we don't anticipate being the only ones or the main ones, but we're certainly going to participate in the process of trying to facilitate and, you know, do whatever we can to help make that happen. But at the end of the day, and this is really a hill we will die on, with, and the very beginning, Publius, that at some point the goal is for Publius to disappear. Like, we don't want Beanstalk to be reliant on any individual or group of individuals whatsoever. And so the long-term vision here is not altered. And while in the short term, like, obviously things have changed. We're doxxed. The substantive thing has changed. You know, we encourage everyone to participate in this process. Basically, this is a group project in many ways.
I see. And you mentioned earlier there's no head of security. Is your organizational model, is that possible under your organizational model? Are you open to it?
Well, Beanstalk itself is just governed by an on-chain DAO. Beanstalk Farms has and someone who's just solely working on security, let's call it. So there's nothing to preclude that from changing in the future, and that would seem to be a prudent thing to do. If anything, and it's like, well, why wasn't there? They're really hard to find. Either the people that have this knowledge base work for auditing firms or are hackers, and so it's very hard to get in touch with any of them and to try to recruit them to work on a single project. And lots of the auditors have all sorts of language in the contracts that we can't solicit their employees. And so it makes it really difficult for Beanstalk Farms or Beanstalk as a protocol to attract, some sort of security specialist. Now, maybe after this happens, someone will raise their hands. But to date, that was not possible, basically.
Okay, thank you for your answers there. The other thing I wanted to check in with you on is it's been made clear that the government system hasn't changed since the Omniscia audit. I thought I heard earlier today that what had changed since then was that assets that could be borrowed in a flash loan had been introduced to the silo. Is that true?
Don't believe that is the thing that changed. As we were saying earlier, our understanding of what changed that facilitated the exploit was that the percentage of BDV in the silo that was in liquidity pools increased dramatically over the past couple of days, and that facilitated via a flash loan the acquiring of enough BDV to supermajority pass a BIP. But the assets that were whitelisted in the silo themselves, at least as far as we understand it, were non-substantive.
I see. Okay, so even when going back to BIP 7 or whatever the audit was, there was the flash loanable assets were already part of the protocol.
Yeah, there's nothing whatsoever that changed since BIP 7 that would have allowed this to happen in our opinion, or based on our understanding at the moment, certainly.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, and obviously they don't want to raise their hands and say, "Hey, we fucked up." That's not something that Omniscia wants to do. And we're not gonna try to force them to do that, but we're also not gonna pretend like this was something that was introduced after the fact.
Yep, understood. Absolutely.
Okay, we had King Shrimp up earlier and they left, but King Shrimp, you wanna? Good. I can't hear you, King Shrimp. Still, okay, we'll move to Mew Mushin.
Hey guys, can you hear me all right?
Yes, can hear you.
Perfect. First off, I want to take my hat off to Publius for doxing themselves, providing all this transparency. Obviously, majority of people I think would have just cut and run, shut down the Discord.
Mew, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I've heard from a lot of people they don't want to hear that. So can you just can you get to the question?
Sure, 100%.
Appreciate it. Also appreciate the sentiment. Bye.
First one, I want to ask about is, was there a bug bounty in place? And if not, why not?
Not that we're in the business of pointing fingers, but this goes back to the decentralized nature of things. The desire for a bug bounty is something we raised a multitude of times over the past couple of months, and for whatever reason, it never happened. So, yeah, there's no reason whatsoever that there was no bug bounty. That was something we liked a lot.
I can actually speak to that a little bit. We did, the one that we looked into was Code Arena, and we did a little analysis of it, and it seemed as if Code Arena was really just using the top 2 or 3 people from Code Arena. Like, it wasn't like a big. The idea behind Code Arena is that you put up your code, and then a bunch of people can look at it. And that's kind of a formal bug bounty program. It looked as if for what we were looking to spend, or I don't know, we were thinking about doing about 50,000 for it, and we sort of analyzed it and decided that that wasn't the one for us, and kept looking, but ultimately didn't find one. So anyway, I just wanted to speak to that a little bit, since that was something that was on my desk.
Fantastic, thanks. And the other thing I wanted to ask about is, is there going to be any attempts to negotiate with a hacker to, say, take a haircut and treat it as a bug bounty and have some money come back? And I don't really know Tornado Cash too well, but as far as I know, I think the 950 mil from Ronin and the 450 mil from Wormhole went through Tornado, or is attempted to go through Tornado, which has liquidity issues for how much it can enter and exit. So it may be the case that the hacker has 75 million sitting there, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, but has 75 mil sitting there that is going to be difficult to clear through the system. So there may be some incentive for him to take 7.5 mil or 5 mil and return the rest of the funds to the protocol. As this being considered?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's, all options are on the table basically, and on that front, we're just trying to consult with lawyers and stuff to do that, properly, basically.
Perfect, thanks. And there's just one more. I don't want to take up too much time. One person that came to mind was, as far as getting liquidity, was Tetranode, who I'm sure everyone knows. The reason he comes to mind is because he's very big he's anti-VC generally. He is controversial, but he does believe in decentralization. And I think he might be a person to approach. And I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Well, for anyone listening, if you have a connection to Tetranode, feel free to try to connect us.
Perfect. That's all I have. Thank you very much, guys.
I had a couple more people up on stage. Martek, are you near mic?
Hi, folks. You can hear me, right? All appreciations for everything. I'll keep it short and everything else. So I'm just thinking how to make it work in the future, right? There are different problems, different sets, and so on. So my background is very corporate lending and borrowing, asset management. I'm leading a few companies that look into digital asset space of that side. And stablecoin is a very cornerstone of everything, right? So most of the corporate lending and borrowing that happens, or most of the stable coin market cap that you see, chunk of it happens on the corporate side, not that much on the retail side. In fact, deals are of the size of hundreds of millions per loan, and so on, right? Now, having said that, what I wanted to also point out is usually people see DeFi and TradFi as mutually exclusive, whereas it is not. What I mean by TradFi is traditional finance, and DeFi, you know already, right? What I wanted to propose, and I want to keep it short, so I'll have a separate discussion if folks are keen or team is keen, is to enable corporate lending and borrowing side, because that will enable hundreds of millions of capital to flow right into Bean's ecosystem. If somehow we can prove, and this has been tried and tested for months, that it works, and now especially that the team is doxed, I think that can be on the table. So that is one aspect, because right now lending and borrowing rates, even with the likes of Celsius, Nexos, and all big players, are quite high. And if Beans can bring it down, and if we can open the doors, I think that will get whole machinery going once again. Yeah, that is one point. Second point is also, we are also leading and running some of the regulated custodians in the space, in the corporate space, right? And when I say regulated custodians, I see more and more DeFi projects coming to us for the treasury management. When I say us, I don't mean only myself and my corporate, I mean all the custodians which are set up. Why? Because A, it avoids all the exploits, hacks, rug opportunities in future. B, they are regulated, so there's always somebody accountable. And C, they are insured, that even if something happens, there is insurance backing them up from Lloyd's of London, Lockton, and so on. So that's also one more aspect. And there are 3-4 other aspects. So if this project takes off, this angle I would also like team to explore, because as much as we are doing in DeFi space, decentralized space, there's a lot that can be done in TradFi space, which can be enabled because of the entire stablecoin ecosystem that we'll be creating. Yeah. And our understanding of decentralization doesn't mean that there is no accountability. It just means that trust is in protocol, not in humans, because everything is coded in protocol, and that's why it's decentralized. Yeah. So I'll stop here and would like to take it offline if there is any interest. Also, I would like to share my opinion on the entire thing. Of course, every option is on the table, and how do we address that? In my personal opinion, not paying back or removing or just writing off all losses of investors is not an option, right? Because you have somebody who has their father's money into the protocol, you have somebody who has 2 children and put all their savings online. So as much as we all support the protocol, we should support the community as well and not just write it off. So these are 2 things I just wanted to say. I do have some solution, but I'm also mindful that we have plenty of people on the line, and I appreciate team taking out hours and hours to address everybody and doxing themselves. So thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And a few more people up. Got Jeff the Baker.
Oh. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Ken.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'll keep it short. You know, I think something important to consider that shouldn't be forgotten about is how Bean came to be in the first place, the methodology behind it, the inception of the project. Bean got to where it was because of the nature it was designed and how different elements were architected. It's unlike anything else that's been seen before. And whatever happens going forward, I think if it loses that nature, it can be detrimental to the future of Bean. Not to say that more secure precedent shouldn't be placed in the future, but I mean, that's the bread and butter of Bean. And with that, Bean has already shown to be one of, if not the most efficient mechanisms in the world for repaying debt. And with that, you know, as we're talking about different ways to go about VC funding or restart, there's a lot of different models that work. And I think all those different models can work for Bean, given that it's shown that it's able to pay off its debts. And, you know, I just think everyone should keep an open mind about those different options. There's a lot of attacks or happenings of this sort that have happened in the past, and other protocols have been able to come back from it.
I mean, we're gonna try our best to help facilitate that for Beanstalk, and you know, it's gonna be a community effort to make that happen. But yeah, definitely think that your comments about how Beanstalk has demonstrated a high efficacy at paying back its debt is a good starting point. So, a lot to position Beanstalk in a positive light for potential people to come in and backstop this, and don't think we need to do that in a way that compromises the integrity of the model by any means.
Okay. Sorry, that was Jeff the Baker. Benji.
Hey guys, I will try to keep it short as well. So as far as I understand, we lost about $75 million worth of on-bean assets, and if we can get them back, basically we can balance back the pools and solve that issue, and then it's just a matter of trust, of people not dumping everything once we go again. I didn't hear much discussion about the possibility of getting these funds back, and I'm not a developer, so I don't have much knowledge about it. But is there any chance, in your opinion, to track or to code in a way or track the trail of the funds going through a tornado, and then work with centralized exchange to basically get these funds back? Obviously, it might not be high chance of doing that, but I didn't hear much discussion about that at all in the last 2 hours of this call.
Yeah, so in short, that's something that we're very much trying to pursue. And there's already there was a firm that does on-chain analysis that reached out to Beanstalk Farms, and they're starting to look into it. And I believe Beanstalk Farms tweeted sort of like an open call for some assistance. And the short answer is to get as much help as possible to try to track these funds down and recover them if possible. But at the same time, feel like it's prudent to proceed as if the funds are not recoverable, and then if they are, that's a great place to be. But the starting place is that they're not recoverable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you as developers and the backgrounds that you have, do you have like any maybe glance or idea what are like how complicated it is, or what's the chance of them being able to really mask the funds through like that amount through the liquidity? It seems like they have less than $1 billion there, maybe about 10x.
Our understanding is that firms like Chain Analysis actually have a way to unmix things like Tornado Cash, and so there is something to be said for these funds are very difficult for people to launder. That's one of the nice things about the blockchain. But we've never really experienced this before, so don't have a sense of what the actual timeline might be or the likelihood of recovery of funds or how much of the funds are likely to be recovered. It's really, no idea.
Okay, understood. Thank you for the time. I think I'm one of the individuals that lost a high amount here. So if there is anything that can be helped in terms of like funding and talking directly with these firms, then I might be happy to participate as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, what's that called on?
Hello?
Hello, what's that called on?
Charlie, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, so Ben, I've got a question and a comment. I'm still, after 2 hours, I'm still a little concerned that it doesn't appear that anybody's taking any responsibility for this and still saying that, that there is no leader and nobody's in charge yet. You guys are clearly the ones that created this product and are answering questions for 2.5 hours. So I guess that's a comment, but my question is, if the point of this is to engender trust going forward, then, how much trust can be created if there's nobody that's going to take responsibility for what went wrong? So I'd like you to answer, if you could, that first, and then I have another question.
I mean, that's up to you. If
I'm asking you. It's not. I mean, it's not up to me. I'm asking you.
You're asking like a rhetorical question at the
No,
end.
no, it's not rhetorical.
It is.
It's an actual question.
Beanstalk. It's like it's unclear at this point in time why someone might want to trust Beanstalk, and therefore.
No, that's not what my question is. No, just hang on one second. My question is, are you saying that you have no responsibility whatsoever for this entire endeavor, for the technology that's built, for the for the platform that's set up? Because if that's the case, then how does anybody, and it's a question, and you're here to engender trust, if that's the case, then who are we to trust going forward that this is not going to happen again if you're not the one that's going to make sure it doesn't happen again? I mean, I can't make sure it doesn't happen again. That's
why not? The code is open source and open, and anyone can read it. So the whole concept is, the only thing that we did was we deployed the contracts on mainnet, and that's something that we worked very hard to do. And at that point in time, since then, we've done everything we can in our power to educate people and to surround Beanstalk with a high quality set of individuals that all want to work on it. But
that's my point. I mean, you are running a business, and this is one of your.
There's no way. How can you say it's running a business? We deployed a piece of software on the Ethereum mainnet. There's no business.
I guess the question is, and I'm not trying to get into an argument. If you're not,
well, you're basically asking us to take responsibility, and that's quite inappropriate. We've been very clear from the beginning that this is an experiment. If you look at all of if you look at the latest roadmap, the first line is Beanstalk is an experiment. People are constantly harassing us. Why don't you take that down? Beanstalk is proving itself. It's like, no, Beanstalk is an experiment. We're all figuring this out together. So idea.
I understand that. I'm not saying it's not an experiment, and I'm not.
Charlie, let's try to limit the crosstalk a little bit. Let's both be Publius. If you can be patient with Charlie, and Charlie will be patient with.
Okay.
But respectfully, we are being patient. But when you ask us to take responsibility, that it's something that is is really inappropriate. Like
Well, let me ask you a question.
go ahead.
Look, you know, you're here as a leader, right? You're here as somebody that is trying to keep this cohort together, and part of that responsibility is to
Don't agree.
get people
Don't
who
agree with
just
that assertion at all. We would say
please
that
don't interrupt me. Come on,
But I
hey,
you. You're saying that we're here as a leader. I disagree with that assertion.
okay,
We're
well,
here as
let me
people.
finish my look. You know, there's
Well,
people on this call. Hang on a second. There's people on this call that lost $75 million. So I
yeah, I
think you
get
can
it.
be
I'm one of
patient.
them.
I think you can be patient and let me ask the question. My
Go ahead.
question
Ask your
is,
question.
if the purpose of this call, because I've been listening for 2 hours, is to get people to stay within this program, to engender trust and support, to stay with you or whomever put this out, then how do we know that this is not going to happen again? How do we know that somebody is looking over the technology to make sure that the right safeguards are in place? Whose job is that? If you're saying that's nobody's job,
Whose job
then
is it? Beanstalk was audited recently. So at the end of the day, we've tried our absolute best to do everything possible to make sure the contracts are secure. There's nothing we can do other than having open source documentation, having all of the things open source on chain that you can read. Like there's no action that we've tried to take to make it such that A, we're the leaders, or B, anyone else is reliant on us for anything. In fact, the whole ethos of decentralization is such that no one is reliant. Like the protocol is not reliant on any individual. So we, from an ethos perspective, just don't agree with the characterization there.
So Charlie, I let that go on for a while, but I didn't want it to devolve for too long. I think it's just a difference. This call is really to explain what happened. It's not a convincing call. It's not a call to convince people, but as we lay the information out for people have to make their own decision whether or not it's something that they want to, continue to be involved with or not. So appreciate the sentiment, but that's probably where I would leave it.
But who people choose to point fingers at, that's up to them. We're here, we've raised our hands, we've identified ourselves. We truly feel like we've conducted ourselves from the beginning in a way that we're willing to stand by, and that's reflected in the fact that we're coming forward today. So we don't feel like we have anything to hide. We're very proud of the technology that Beanstalk has demonstrated as possible, and at the end of the day, well, this is really horrible, and we acknowledge that there's a lot of money that was lost, and people are suffering, and people are angry. This is one of the things about decentralized technology, and it's a work in progress to figure out how do you have on-chain governance. This was something that Banksy raised a little while ago. It's difficult, and we're quite empathetic to the anger as to like how can something like this happen. It's like, yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. That's the short answer. And the longer answer is, I think everyone that has been involved in Beanstalk to date has really tried their best to facilitate its success collectively. And the audit that was conducted, we thought was a big deal towards having some verification that, in addition to just being out in the open, there were experts that had a history of looking at this, and obviously that wasn't good enough. So it's very unfortunate, and we're very empathetic.
Okay, next, JGR Northwood, or Greenwood. I can't hear you yet. Okay, Rated, brought you up.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know. I just have a couple questions about the audit. It might have already been answered, but hopefully I'm not doing any repeats. If I am, just shut me down. You know, a lot of talk about responsibility, and I think ultimately it's it's a huge shame, the whole situation, and I feel the sentiment that you were saying that yeah, a lot of people lost a lot of money today. It's fucking tragic. I mean, there's no way around that. And while you could sit here and everyone in the Discord all day has been pointing fingers at every single person on the whole planet, it's not productive. But I do have a question of, I mean, earlier, Publius, you were kind of pointing at a notion that Omniscia was kind of, they did audit it, but I'm hearing different stories. Omniscia says they didn't audit it, and there were changes made after their last audit that allowed for this. And I was kind of hearing sentiment that there weren't from you. And I'm just curious, why didn't Omniscia audit the new changes? And then also, did they audit? You said that the code hadn't been changed since then. So I'm just curious, the code that was exploited.
Yeah, so to clarify, the code that was exploited was the emergency commit functionality for BIPs, which has been there since launch. Omniscia audited a commit hash through BIP 7, and it's really, the question is, well, why isn't the whole contract updated? We tried very hard to get them to do that, but in short, they insisted on a commit, and then any upgrades that happened since that, they wanted to look at after the fact. And so they put together the initial audit report on the commit hash through BIP 7, and then the anticipation was to have them start to audit all of the code that was introduced after BIP 7 in the near future. And then obviously there was also the Trail of Bits audit lined up for early June, that the thought was they were going to audit the current state of Beanstalk because they didn't need a commit hash in advance. And that would basically facilitate all of the contract to be audited. So substantively, why did they only audit through BIP 7? It's because it took them 4 months to audit Beanstalk from the time we sent them the code to when the audit was released, and that basically there was a ton of development between then. But substantively, the new code was not the thing that was exploited. So in their report, which we looked at, they said that it was the whitelisted assets that were added via other BIPs, which were used in the attack, but that was not the thing that was exploited, if that makes sense. So go ahead.
The code that was exploited was present on the Omniscia audit.
The code that was exploited was included in the Omniscia audit. That's correct.
Okay. It's really cool to have that said and clear, because I mean, yeah, I think earlier you were kind of saying, we need to be, kind to Omniscia, but I mean, at the same time, it does seem like if there is a finger to point
We're
to,
just not pointing fingers, but the point is the code that was exploited, they certainly had.
Okay. And then, I have a couple more questions, which is just in the spirit of the blockchain and decentralization, have the team wallets ever been made known? And also, did you guys have any losses from this?
Yeah, so the Publius wallet's on chain. There are other wallets that we individually have that thus far have not been disclosed. We individually lost a lot of money today. There's a lot of questions of I bet Publius has made lots of money from this at this point. We really have not made any money in the grand scheme of things. And the vast majority of our assets were still invested in Beanstalk, providing liquidity. And furthermore, and this isn't super substantive, but it is worth saying, we really didn't launch this in a way that facilitated us to have a large amount of ownership. So at this point, the three of us individually each have mid-single digit % of stock probably, or at least until the exploit happened. But where there's more exposure to the protocol is just our families, if that makes sense, because where the initial $1 million or plus that were participated, we tried to elicit that from or attract that initial set of contributors from as wide a set of people as possible, basically, such that we were not the ones in control. So there's the short answer is, just speaking on behalf of my family lost $8 million of liquidity today, half of which was non-Bean. And then
I'm really sorry to hear that. Seriously.
think that it was probably a similar loss for the other two families as well.
Yeah, that's a hell of an Easter.
Yeah, and frankly, it's not like our loss is not the concern. And just speaking explicitly, one of the things that we're inclined to do to try to sweeten the pot for a VC that is interested in backing this thing is to try to sell them some of our pods OTC effectively, and then donate any of the proceeds from that to seeding some of the liquidity. So it's unclear to us how much help that will provide. But it is going to be tens of millions of pods across all of our families, and we're basically, we're inclined to get all of our families to donate all of the pods or the vast majority of them to try to, the ship has sailed on this thing, so we really just want to do the right thing and try to give Beanstalk the best chance at succeeding going forward. So,
Absolutely.
Not really focused on individual gain at this point.
Yeah, cool. I don't want to overstay my welcome, and I think it's really cool hearing kind of a human side to this. I think a lot of people are just treating you as a name on a Discord when you are a real person, and so is everyone else that's worked on the protocol. I think the last thing I want to say is just I do think time is of the essence. You've been told that a million times, but this is something that I've heard in chat, which is and I think it's true. This needs to take days, not weeks. And I know things take time and all that, but just updating the community and really trying to jump on things as fast as possible here with without rushing, which is an oxymoron, but just keeping the community updated as fast as possible and really jumping on some of these VC opportunities that might be coming through your door is definitely going to be beneficial. I think a classic case too would be that the bridge exploit recently with like $600 million, and within 24 hours they had all that liquidity back through VCs, and I think there's a world where that can be done here. This was a really powerful protocol, so that's all.
Appreciate that. Couldn't agree more. Think that the only real change in circumstance between Beanstalk and Wormhole is that Beanstalk really was not backed by VCs at all.
Yeah, that was pre-backed by VCs. Yeah, which is why they had it so fast. But yeah,
it's a little bit tough, but nonetheless, are with you that there's certainly a path forward here, and we're going to pursue it as fast as possible. And just want to say that separate from getting the liquidity committed and some faith reinstilled in things, it may take a week or two to just restart Beanstalk, if that makes sense, to reset the state, fix the governance. It may take more than that. So while we certainly are going to try our best and work with the various members of the community that have already reached out to us to try to facilitate some sourcing of liquidity, at the same time, just speaking candidly, we don't think it's a good idea to just turn Beanstalk back on right now. It's got to be the issue has to be resolved, and removing the governance fast, it doesn't really help us in terms of having a sustainable protocol going forward. So agree the bleeding can be stopped immediately, but that's different than kind of turning the machine back on, if that makes sense.
Okay, cool. And I have one very, very last question. I know, Dumpling, you want to kill me. One very last question.
Go ahead. These are great questions. Right. Please continue.
Thank you. Sorry, Dumpling. I see you on meeting. What's it called? Okay, one very, very last question, and I do think it's just interesting to point out. Would you say that Omniscia was just lying in their report, given the fact that they did audit the part of the code that was exploited here, and they're saying flat out that they didn't? It just seems a little at the end of the day, I just not a finger pointing thing, but I do think that this auditing firm needs to be looked at individually.
I think it's a little disingenuous what they wrote.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I won't bother you guys anymore, and thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thanks for that. I think headphones are dying. I think we've went 2.5 hours here. I think it's been pretty good. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it.
There's still some more hands though. We're inclined to continue until there are no more hands.
All right.
We
will do a few more.
There's no question. We're not. This is an open floor.
Greenwood. I think you wanted to go. Okay, Jeff the Baker. All right, but if no one unmutes, then we can go. Triggs?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to make a final comment. Sounds like everything's wrapping up, but there was a lot of talk about responsibility. It was everybody's favorite subject, and I just wanted to voice as a community member, I accept responsibility for my part in this as a decentralized organization. That's something that we all need to be willing to do, and I respect the the exposure that Publius has put forward here, as a step of responsibility without having to take more responsibility than is due to him, because it is inappropriate. And so I encourage all community members to, we need to work together to take responsibility as a whole, to understand we all learned something really important here. And everyone's just as responsible as anyone else as a community member to learn how to get to fix that going forward. And we need to be more considerate of, how BIPs are introduced and approved. On-chain governance is something that's really important for what we're working towards, and we have to figure out how to do it better. It's an experiment, and we just learned something really important, and now we have to move forward. Thanks a lot.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Am I good to ask my question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
In response to the comment by Publius recently that you guys are interested in donating proceeds from an OTC pod deal to VCs, my question is, why are you guys going towards the route of continuing on with the current contract and figuring out a way to remediate debt, as opposed to consolidating all debt in terms of the people who lost their money outright and some blended rate for the pods in line, and issuing some type of separate redemption there, or handling that debt separately? Was there a concerted decision to continue on with the current contract as opposed to essentially fork and restart the pod line with a consolidated debt handled elsewhere?
There's nothing been decided as far as we're concerned, and the point is, the decision to move forward with like a brand new protocol with no debt, that's like a radical step that the community would be taking. And so the thought is, in the short term, at least, to see if there's interest in resuscitating this from some VCs. And if there's interest, then the question is, well, how do we make that happen? And we're willing to basically grease the wheels as much as possible on that deal. In addition to whatever the protocol could sell, if we could sell some pods OTC in the current line, and then use some of the proceeds from that to contribute additional funds to seed this thing again, that would potentially be a symbiotic way to do both, if that makes sense. But nothing's been decided as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and that answers my question. Thank you.
I think Elastic Bean had another question. If not, Smart John 7.
Yes, hello. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry if my question is a bit simplistic, but I don't have as much experience as everyone. But the hacker apparently stole, from what I understand, $74 million worth of funds. Now, my question is, what happened to the rest of the funds? Because I believe at the time the total value was up to around 150, 180 million or so. So I just wanted to just quickly understand sort of what happened to the rest of the money.
Yeah, for sure. So the TVL was a function of the deposited beans and the value of the liquidity pools, and that included the value of the beans in the liquidity pools. But when the hacker was able to drain the protocol, the thing that ultimately has value are the non-Beanstalk assets at the point of the attack, if that makes sense. So the only value that they were able to actually steal are the non-Beanstalk assets. So it was whatever's not Bean that was in the silo or in the liquidity pools.
Understood. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Tejas here. So I have been following Beanstalk for some time, trying to understand the mechanism by which it works. I never invested, basically thinking, I will fully understand it. And I was trying to understand, I'm not obviously not a VC, but what is the scope for, you guys to consider taking in money from like 1 or 2 BTC kind of funds from investors, and sort of putting it, giving them a chance as well, rather than only VCs taking this up.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to try to talk to as many VCs that are willing to think about backstopping Beanstalk as possible, is the short answer.
Okay.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry earlier, Dumpling. My mic wasn't working. I think you answered this previously, Publius, but considering that the pod, the debt instrument, is critical to Beanstalk in terms of measuring demand for soil and also accumulating debt, so you can earn the equivalent and bring back the price to peg. Wouldn't it be like super rash if you guys just like defaulted in the whole debt, because then people would have a really hard time, even though, I mean, it's very impressive that Beanstalk has repaid like about, I think, $50 million worth of debt. If you like default on the whole other 600 million, it would be very hard, even with new branding, to attract to attract lenders that would trust the protocol.
Yeah, I totally hear you, and I think that the argument is strong. But the argument's strong the other way as well, which is right now there's no reason to lend to the protocol effectively. That may not be the winning argument, but that's the argument that could be made. And so, again, we don't know what the right course of action here is in terms of honoring the pod line or not. Whenever the token is migrated to a new contract and stuff, our inclination would be that there's a path forward where all the pods, all the stock are honored, and assuming that there is some demand for some alternative pods or alternative stock, or just alternative pods and stock, or something where there's demand to provide some liquidity here, that can be figured out in a way where all of the shareholders are, none of the pods are effectively defaulted on, if that makes sense. Now, we'll just make and it's sort of semantics, but technically the Beanstalk contract is not going to default on the pods. Like, your pods will always be there. Your pods won't disappear. But the point is that unless Beanstalk is able to recover the price above $1 again, then the pods will not become harvestable, if that makes sense. So here the real question is whether to migrate all of the current obligations of the current contract to a new contract, to try to honor the previous obligation. So that's where it's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. That's mainly the question, if you will basically transfer the pod line to this new contract.
It's certainly possible. So it's like,
Yeah.
Anything is possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hello, can I ask my question?
Hello.
Hello? Yes. So my question is
We
this.
lost Dumpling. Didn't realize we lost Dumpling. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. From your perspective in this protocol, since your team had built this or whatnot, everything in DeFi, in my opinion, is a zero-sum game. So, in your opinion, who long-term are going to be the losers of this protocol if things go down? So let me give you my perspective and opinion. My opinion is this. So there was a really big surplus of money currently in the last like 10, 12, 14 days, etc. When this goes down, the next time it goes below peg, I think that it's going to be very difficult to regain peg because there's not going to be a lot of people getting in line to buy those pods because they're going to be so far in the FIFO line. It's so far out. So who long term do you think would be the losers in this game? I don't think that there's possibility of having all these people who are winners, because clearly I was winning for a day. I literally deposited yesterday, won significant amounts of money, let's say, and we all know what happened this morning. So it's for the people who made this protocol, what do you guys think is the end game here?
So we would just push back on your initial statement, which is that DeFi is a zero-sum game. We really feel strongly that well-designed protocols create a lot of value, and in this case, that was reflected in all of the Bean value, right? If we go back to one of the previous questions that was just asked around how is there, only 75 million or so stolen, but the TVL was much higher, there was all that other value created in the form of beans. And so that's not a negative sum game. And therefore, the question is, well, who loses if this thing is resuscitated? Well, the key.
No. I'm sorry. It's not about resuscitate. I'm just curious. I really want to know, like, your thoughts about what happens. Let's say that this goes on for another few months without any sort of hack. So, or years, let's say. There's got to be somebody who loses money, right? I mean,
if Beanstalk were to continue, if this hack hadn't happened and Beanstalk were to have continued hack free, we would disagree fervently with the idea that that's a negative sum system, and there would be someone footing the bill for that. That would be something we disagree with, from an economics perspective.
Very interesting, because economically, in my opinion, I mean, you can be you can explain to me why you think differently, but my opinion is the people who are buying the pods are the people who are basically footing the bill, because they're far in line, like 600 or 700 million in debt, basically, to the protocol to make like any sort of money. So I think that feverishly people have, I mean, myself included, it's fine, but feverishly people have put money in, but the pods aren't going to pay out for maybe never. So those are the people who are actually going to be the losers. I mean, how can that not be true? Who else in this protocol?
So we would look at something like Bitcoin or any other proof of work system where you have people paying a cost, burning electricity, or in the case of Beanstalk, burning value that you're lending to Beanstalk to create some sort of utility. And in the case of Beanstalk, Bitcoin, it's a secure, decentralized currency. In the case of Beanstalk, you're creating some sort of stable asset. And so the idea is, if you get enough people that are incentivized to mine Bitcoin or to lend to Beanstalk, you can actually create utility that is a large value creator. And that's where, we would disagree with you.
No, I agree with any disagreements. That's fine. I mean, it's very interesting to hear other perspectives. But so you're saying that long term, the pod people, I mean, someone's footing the bill, though, in my opinion, because
one of the things we find most compelling about DeFi is that it's not negative sum if you design it properly. Like, that's the cool.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the whole shebang. And the tragic thing that has occurred today is that Beanstalk was just at the very beginning of demonstrating that fact. Like, that was a fact that many people had lost faith in after what happened to ESD and DSD, and you have all these cool protocols that nobody uses. It's like, how's that possible? It's like, because the economics don't work right now. And the really cool thing that had started to happen over the past couple of days and maybe a week and a half was that the economics of Beanstalk were starting to demonstrate that a positive sum, like a
Oh yeah,
positive system, can
I'm not
actually
saying
exist.
sure. I'm not saying positive. I'm just saying like zero sum game. I'm not saying
Well,
positive or
it's not
negative.
even. It's not about negative sum or zero sum. This is massively positive sum.
But let's say I was making 30 grand a day. Let's
I
say.
guess
I would say.
Let me try to answer that.
Yeah, thank
The
you.
Fed
Yeah,
is
thank
the Fed is the direct entity that is not benefiting, because instead of using USDC, you are going to use beans. For various purposes. At a later point, when it becomes really successful, and only just buying the pods is not the question, but it is used for various other things as well. So from that perspective, if you consider it a zero-sum game, the non-DeFi part of it is the people who hold the US dollars, they are losing, the Fed is losing. That's how I would put it.
Thank you, Stajis. I guess I would encourage you to continue this discussion in this week's university class, so we can come and talk about all economics then. I would also ask those who are on stage who have already done asking questions, just so that we're able to know who's next or who, ask. Caesar, is it you, or did I miss someone?
I can go, but I was the most recent person up here.
Okay, I see. Puissance, do you want to go?
Hey, yes, thanks for taking my question. From my understanding, beans are minted to fund development. So with bean at its current price, will development continue, and for how long?
So the short answer is the beans that were minted for the budgets are valueless at the moment. But lots of members of Beanstalk Farms have reached out to us to kind of let us know they're ready to keep charging ahead. So at the moment, unclear exactly who will be working on Beanstalk or trying to get it up and running, but it seems like there's a lot of community members that are still interested.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is it Caesar next?
Sure. I got a question. Is there any settling on like how much is needed to reboot if Podline stays as is and some sort of compensation goes to the silo members, whether it be the airdrop or some sort of other system like airdropping like stock or something? I'm not sure what has been settled on, but has anyone sat down and done the economics, the math of how much, like what's the bare minimum?
Well, there is no minimum. If no one was going to sell their beans, everyone had full faith in the system. You need $10. You reseed the pools. No one sells their beans. For minimal money, the pools can be at $1 if no one's selling. So the fundamental problem is that it's unclear how many people want to sell, and the amount of beans that want to be sold can change depending on how quickly Beanstalk returns to peg and what it's trading at and what the sentiment is. And so there's a lot of different factors that weigh into that. And so instead, you kind of look at the maximum, and it's like, well, there were 108 million beans in circulation. So the maximum liquidity you could possibly need is 108 million, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, any other questions, Caesar, or that was it?
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. I don't want to rant. I don't want to go on and on. So, I'm good.
All right. Thanks. All right, Silverbone, you're next.
You guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. So very quick question, but and you may not have thought of this yet. Sorry, just to backtrack. Thank you guys for answering questions for 3 hours now. After what I'm sure is a long day for all of us, but my question is, when, if there is a compensation plan for silo holders, when would the snapshot be taken? And what I'm specifically concerned about or interested in is for edge cases where people had, say, requested a withdrawal within the four epochs instead of 5, or 3 or 2 or 1. How would those people be treated? Because their stock would obviously be gone, but they technically got burned by this just like everybody else.
Meaning you had withdrawn right before it happened?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, there is that edge case, and don't really have an answer, but the idea is, you still have your assets, if that makes sense, right? Like the BDV of the assets that you had are like that was still stolen from you. So there's no reason why, in whatever way we're moving forward here, that shouldn't be possible.
Got it. So even though the stock was gone, so it wouldn't necessarily correlate 1-to-1 to stock, but it would still the
details
the
of how
CRB
the
pool.
actual on-chain reimbursement or not even reimbursement, but structuring happens is really contingent on the structure of the liquidity that's being contributed, if that makes sense. And so it's just a little hard to speculate at the moment.
Okay. I would just ask that you guys consider that whenever devising a plan.
We have heard you, Silverbone, and we would also encourage you to continue to raise your hand as these discussions happen over the next couple of days.
Of course. Thanks.
Thank
guys.
you, Silverbone. AJ, I see you're back. AJ Pickle, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Can hear you. We can hear you, AJ.
Like, what does the process kind of look like? And have you considered some type of program where siloers like me could guarantee that we would hold, our deposits for an extended period of time in order to prevent a run on the liquidity pools?
Everything is being considered, and it's so, the short answer is, don't want to say no, that's not being considered.
Okay, Bultoshi, next. Bultoshi.
Hey, can you guys hear me? Hello,
Yes.
hello.
We can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I just hopped into town hall. Obviously due to time zone reasonings, I hopped in quite late. So first of all, I know that right now, it's a very, very bad situation for everyone. What I would like to know is, number one, what are the current strategies or methodologies that we have discussed so far in terms of compensating the silo and plotline? Just a quick summary will be fine. Number two, what is the timeline that we're going to put on this to carry this out? And number three, when are we going to be restarting Beanstalk to push things forward? And number four, obviously I know that in this community there's a lot of people that has a lot of value, and I'm sure that we can all contribute. So is there some sort of setup that we can actually provide real values, the skills that we have, for example, dev, marketing, etc. Because I'm definitely down to help. Yeah, these are my questions.
So all options are on the table with regards to the structure moving forward. There's a lot of different things that were discussed, and there will be, God willing, someone's recording this, we believe, and this will be posted for everyone to listen to. We would highly encourage you to listen to this because there have been a lot of different ideas discussed and proposed. With regards to the timeline on that, the timeline on structuring that, is really dependent on the ability to attract some liquidity that's interested in coming, to the deal table, basically, to meet with the DAO. And so that's really the main holdup on that front. With regards to the timeline for starting Beanstalk back up, that's going to be at least a couple weeks, 1 to 2 weeks, but more likely maybe a month or so. There's like the system right now is not, it's paused, but more than that, it's not in a state where it could run likely with any chance of success. In particular, 30 plus million of the beans are still owned by the attacker. And with regards to what the community can do, A, proposing ideas and stuff is very helpful at this point in time. B, participating in the discussion of seeing whether there's people that are willing to come and backstop this thing to some extent. And then C, participating in the discussion with the DAO on steps to proceed. This is, there's a lot of different things you can do to help out here.
Cool, thank you.
All right, I just wanted to say I moved some of the people on stage back to the audience, but if you have any more questions, please join again. I think, Derek, you're next.
Great. I was hoping, and I'll give the caveat that I am a little bit fuzzy on some of the economics of the total protocol settings, but I jumped in just out of interest in all of that. But I was hoping you could speak a little bit to what would the pitch to a VC look like, and what is the thing that would benefit for adding this to kind of the protocol.
Yeah, so the positioning is that there's a credit history that Beanstalk has, which if it's able to successfully use its mechanisms to return to PEG, like the sky is sort of the limit for this thing. And the nature of the pod line and potentially a specific fundraiser or BIP to to kind of bring in the liquidity at specific terms could make it such that they can, A, backstop the credit for the short term, B, at some point become just normal stakeholders just like everybody else, and C, put the system in a really good position moving forward such that they've created a lot of value for themselves. I think there's a really attractive pitch there. So, it's unclear if there'll be any biters or takers, but there's definitely something worth looking at in our opinion.
I just want to say one thing before I jump off. It's this. My feeling before we had this town hall was that this was an inside job. I thought that this was something sort of a slow rug and then a hard rug all of a sudden. After hearing this, after hearing the developers and the people who made this protocol discuss this, I believe that they had nothing to do with this. I mean, it's clear to me. So going forward, I think the team needs to figure out a way to make this thing happen, get this thing back starting. I don't know what's fair. I lost a significant sum of money. A lot of people have. I mean, it doesn't matter. But whatever the team decides, I have inputs and things like that. There was a very interesting idea earlier, which was to put some of the money in front of the pods to compensate those people. That's not a bad idea because that's the debt that's going to be paid. I mean, it's up to whatever you guys end up deciding. But I do thank you guys for doing this. I didn't hear the earlier part where you guys were doxxed, but I'll listen to that later. But thank you. You guys changed my mind. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
All right, Matt Bean.
Hi. I was wondering if there is a possibility to raise the liquidity from the community itself, because it seems like they are pretty pumped up. Is there something which can be done which is
Yes, we got to figure out how to source this as much as possible from the community.
No, I was thinking mostly like a separate protocol, like something separate which just plugs into and like kickstarts the Bean protocol, and then there will be some mechanism outside of that protocol which allows them to like get their capital back or whatever.
So there's this protocol, just thinking out loud, there's this protocol route that people were trying to develop on top of Beanstalk that would facilitate basically something similar to Anchor, where you have fixed rate deposits and then the ability to take the other side of that bet. And the key differentiator was that unlike UST, which has no positive carry, because beans do have positive carry, you're actually just taking like a bet on the yield on the beans. And
Exactly.
therefore, like that's a like that's a very unique leverage opportunity, and that type of structure would actually be the perfect thing for what you're talking about. The only problem is Root wasn't developed yet. It was just in the development stages. But like, there's no reason why over the next month or two, as this thing is getting restarted, that can't be facilitated. Like, there's totally, you guys have us so inspired that there's a path forward here. So we're gonna go after this call, take a shower, and try to clear our head basically. And tomorrow we promise you that we're gonna wake up and come to the drawing board with an open mind and, you know, discuss with all of you the best ways forward, but feeling very maybe we're fools for feeling it, but we feel very optimistic about what's been built here in the community here, and that there might be a path forward. And you know, we humbly ask for those of you that are interested in working on making that happen to just, you know, to come
Yeah,
out.
because I absolutely believe that, like, if magically the liquidity comes back, there's nothing stopping this protocol. So it's just about like taking a loan against the protocol. So, which I think the community will be pumped to contribute.
Couldn't agree more.
I
Thank
had
you.
a proposal I wanted to raise in regards to rebuilding the liquidity, actually. Oh, is it okay if I speak now?
Yeah, I think so. Matt Bean, are you done? I think you can go, Cephas.
Okay, sure, thanks. So I apologize that this has been raised earlier. I only joined midway through, but given that there's quite a significant overlap between the communities of Beanstalk and Olympus, and given that the Olympus guys have had similar proposals in the past to aid protocols that are not in a great position, in perhaps as an alternative to, or maybe even in addition to seeking VC funding, we could approach them and offer them a OTC pod deal to help perhaps bootstrap some liquidity.
Totally agree. And that's also, there's a lot of different things. And if really at the end of the day, the protocol needs $50 to $100 million, there's no reason with a variety of different mechanisms. If we go back to the core idea that Beanstalk really relies on a variety of different market participants with their own strategies and exposures and prerogatives and trading strategies. Like, there's no reason why there can't be 5 different simultaneous things that are rolled out to try to make this happen. So at the end of the day, though, the question becomes how to do this the right way. That's not so clear. That's one of the reasons why we raised our hands and wanted to be open and honest about, you know, what's going on and who we are, and as transparent as possible. But nonetheless, feel like there is a path forward. It's just important to get it right. So yeah, it's today's not a great day. Today's not a great day, but if Beanstalk is able to come back from this, think it may actually be viewed not as a great day individually, but as a great opportunity for Beanstalk to really prove that the model works. And we said the same thing at 24 cents. And now we're saying it at 1 cent. So that's where we're at, basically.
Bultoshi, do you want to take the question?
Yeah. So I just want to clarify. So number one, if we do gain the liquidity back, does that mean essentially anyone that was in Silo and Pod will get a 100%, I would say, compensation? But obviously that compensation will take
It's
time.
totally unclear. It's totally unclear. Like, what will happen is totally unclear. It depends on what the people that are willing to provide the liquidity are willing to do. It depends on a lot of different stuff, you know? So very much unclear at the moment what will happen.
Okay. And I saw on Twitter earlier that you guys dox yourselves. So does that mean from now on, do you think, you know, shooting videos and then actually proposing plans via video instead of just voice call will be an option? Because I think that will bring a lot of transparency and trust into the protocol as well.
I mean, maybe, that's today's a new day. A lot of things changed today. So, don't want to commit to it. I don't like wearing makeup. But yeah, we recognize that there's a lot that people have questions about, and there needs to be answers, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to just participate in this discussion in the capacity that we have. But unclear whether moving a video is like the most substantive change, but it's like it is what it is at this point.
Yeah. The last thing is something from a comment on from me individually, is that I think Beanstalk is probably, I've been in crypto for like 5 years. This is one of the best projects in terms of stablecoin and DeFi that I've ever been in, because the branding, the way that you guys provide plans, execution, the community, I think this is actually a total game changer. And whatever happened today, I think is just an obstacle towards our success, right? For what we want to achieve in the stablecoin market and what we want to do in blockchain, what we face today is tiny. Like, to be honest, I lost a lot of money in the high six figures, but what we face today is tiny, because the stablecoin market is 160 billion today, 180 actually, and it's only going to get bigger in the next 5 years. And for what we actually got in damages today, overall it's going to be a tiny hit, right? I know a lot of my fellow beans like to say we got slapped today. We got slapped really fucking hard, but this is part of it. So I just want to say, you guys need to keep pushing forward, because we're going to be behind you.
Really appreciate that.
Okay, we'll leave it for a last minute if anyone else has a question. Otherwise, Publius, you can close. Amartek?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I'll just reiterate what somebody suggested on the group earlier. If a bounty has not been proposed, I think that should be done immediately, because that's a low-hanging fruit. So we all know it's very hard for hackers to get all the money out instantly. So 7.5 million, if you return the assets, happy to give it to you. I think as a community, we're all okay to take a 10% hit and to see this going forward, rather than to take a long route and do all that stuff. So just one thing that I wanted to reiterate. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. And if there are no other questions, Publius, I think we can close.
Yeah, we just close by saying thank you all for listening and participating in the discussion, and understand this is not the thing everyone wants to be talking about, certainly. So, yeah, we're very sorry that this has occurred, and it fucking sucks, guys. It fucking sucks. So, thank you all.
Thank you all for joining, and join us on University class. That's on Tuesday. And once again, thank you all for joining.